The Don's widow. The chapel felt too small for the quiet. Candles burned low along the walls, their flames steady as if they had been told not to sway. Black cloth draped the pews and railings. Rain beaded on the stained glass and ran down in thin veins that made the saints look like they were crying. People filled the rows in dark clothes that didn't flash or shine. Men with shoulders that narrowed or widened depending on who passed them. Women with veils that turned their faces into soft shadows. Bodyguards stood along the sides of the room like part of the architecture. Somewhere beyond the doors, engines hummed under the rain. I sat in the front row with a handkerchief folded so tight in my fist that the seams marked my palm. A photograph of Marco stood on an easel near the casket. The photographer had caught one of his good angles, the one that softened his jaw and made his eyes look like they always meant the right thing. The image felt like a story we had all told ourselves, a sweet lie we kept polishing. I remembered a different face. Marco, late again. Marco, tie crooked, wine glass abandoned, grin loose. Marco, whispering that he would make it right tomorrow, and then tomorrow never coming. The priest's voice flowed over us, round and careful. Words about mercy and rest, about a soul fed with light. He spoke as if there was a map. He spoke as if I could follow it. I looked at the casket and thought about the last argument I had with Marco. The topic shifted in memory the way it always did. A gambling debt. A call he refused to explain. A lipstick smudge on a glass in our kitchen that was not mine. He had touched my shoulder and smiled that easy smile that made other people forgive him. I had forgiven him so many times that forgiveness felt like something I owed. A door opened behind us. The mood in the room snapped to attention without anyone moving. That was how you knew who had arrived. Dante walked down the aisle without hurry. His suit was black, clean lines, no shine. The air changed as he passed, like the pressure shift that comes with a storm. People straightened without looking at him. Some men dropped their eyes. Some watched him in the slice of vision between their lashes and the edge of their wives' veils. He was not beautiful. Beauty draws attention that can be ignored. Dante drew attention, like a magnet draws filings. He did not take it. He owned it. He stopped at the casket. His gaze flicked once to Marco's photograph and stayed there, a measured heartbeat, the way a surgeon studies a scan. He placed a single white rose on the polished wood. The flower lay exactly parallel to the edge, as if any other angle would have been a lie. The gesture was not tender. It was exact. The exactness made my throat tighten. He lifted his eyes and the distance between us closed. It felt like a line drawn with a knife. Not pity, not comfort, recognition. It said, "I see you." It said, "I see what this is." I remembered the first time I had stood close enough to hear him breathe. The night of my wedding reception, when he arrived late because business would always arrive first for him. Marco had laughed and clapped his brother's back and told him to smile before his face cracked. Dante had asked for the music to be turned down. The DJ had laughed, then lowered the volume. Later, my aunt told me I would get used to him. No one ever got used to the ocean. They learned where to stand. The service moved like a clock. Kneel, stand, sit, listen. Perfume drifted, heavy and expensive. I stared at the candles until they smeared into gold threads. When people rose for the final prayer, I stood because everyone stood. The way the tide pulls you even if you hold on to a rock. When we filed past the casket, Dante stepped aside, leaving just enough room for me to pass. My elbow brushed the edge of his hand. The touch felt like a gate clicking shut. Outside, the rain was finer, more like breath than weather. Grass gave way under my heel and then found itself. Umbrellas bloomed. The priest's voice thinned against the open air. The casket lowered on its straps with a long, slow hum. I wanted to remember the light on the wood. I wanted to remember nothing at all. People said what you say beside open ground. May he rest. May you find peace. May the days be gentle. A woman kissed my cheek and left a little circle of cold on my skin where the air caught the damp. A man I had seen at dinners lifted my hand and pressed it once. His palm was dry. His eyes were quick, alert for something I did not want to give. When the crowd turned back to the cars, Dante appeared at my side as if the ground had made him there. He didn't touch me. He did not need to. Ride with me. I have my own car. Ride with me. I'm fine. You're not safe, he said, and did not raise his voice. The driver opened the door. I got in because I did not want to stand in the rain and argue with a man who never argued. He joined me, closed the door, rested his hands on his knees. The engine noise wrapped around us like a soft hum. He took a handkerchief from his pocket and placed it on the seat between us. The same crisp white, the folding neat. It sat there like a promise that would not ask. You should eat before the wake, he said. I'm not hungry. You will be. Eat before the weakness feels like grief. That sounds like a threat. It's advice. We did not speak again. The city slid by in gray plains, polished by rain. In a narrow street, a boy in a bright jacket ran after a bus and caught the rail with one hand. The color slapped me awake. Then we were at the gates and through them and up the curve of the drive. The house rose ahead, drawn in stone and glass, with its low walls, its cameras tucked under eaves like dark eyes. Inside, the hall had been turned into a wake. Flowers in thick arrangements leaned over platters of food. Glassware shone. Lines of coffee and whiskey made a polite truce. The air had the weight of lilies and steam. Staff stood where they could be useful. Families stood where they could be seen. People came in clusters. Their faces arranged themselves with care. They took my hands like I was an icon you touch for luck. Words flew past me and caught on my clothes. If you need anything, we are with you. Marco had such a good heart. I answered and did not answer. The rhythm of moving and pausing made time feel like a wide hallway with no doors. I caught Dante across the room more than once, talking with men who knew how to talk without moving their mouths. He never raised his voice. Once he tilted his head by a fraction, and one of the men nodded as if a plan had settled in his pocket. He looked at me once, no longer than good manners required. It was still longer than I wanted. A server held out a plate with something warm and simple. I took it because refusing would become a scene in someone's story. The first bite unclenched something in my stomach. I hated that he had been right. I hated the growing list of things he was right about. Near the windows, a cluster of men stood close. Their suits were a little wrong for this room. Their haircuts were right for a different one. Their voices cut low. Dante won't leave her alone. He can't. The vultures are circling. Vultures know whose roof they're on. She's a weakness if she stays unclaimed. Not for long. I moved away before they felt seen. I didn't want to give them the small thrill of being overheard. I passed the portrait hall and felt the eyes of younger Romanos follow me. Someone had once told me old money loved portraits because it proved they had always been looking at themselves. Our painter had softened my jaw too. My painted eyes were calm. The real ones were not. I slipped into the small side chapel off the main hall. Fewer flowers here. More air. The candles were shorter, and the light warmer. I sat on the bench at the back and let my spine loosen a little. The silence felt honest, not performative. It did not expect anything from me. I thought about Marco the way you think about someone who once pressed a warm hand against your cheek while lying about where he had been. I thought about how easy it had been to confuse charm with goodness and forgiveness with love. I thought about how a promise can feel like a ladder until you notice you have been climbing down. The door opened. Dante stood in the frame, as much presence as body. He did not look around. He looked at me. Then he closed the door in a way that made no sound and crossed the room. You have 20 minutes, he said, that little. Too much quiet becomes a habit. People mistake it for surrender. Let me choose my habits, Roy. Choose ones that keep you alive. You didn't come here to be kind. I don't do kind, he said. I do what works. His face did not soften. The restraint in him was a kind of temperature. Other men ran hot or cold. He ran at a simmer that never switched off. When he left, the room felt briefly bigger. Then the air took its shape again. Back in the hall, the noise had thickened into the kind that wraps itself around your head and makes it hard to pick out words. I took another plate because I needed something to do with my hands. A woman with perfect nails told me to rest. A man with a careful smile told me I looked strong. I held the plate level and imagined setting it down hard enough to crack. A wine glass clinked against a tray. Two men by the mantels brushed coats and facts. Best if he marries her. Best if he does it fast. He will. He already has, the rest is paperwork. A sharp laugh quickly smothered. I walked toward the far doors where the terrace waited behind glass. Rain hung in bright threads from the awning. The garden looked like a painting left out overnight. I stood with my hand on the handle but did not open it. The cool on the other side of the glass was a promise I did not trust. Someone stopped near me and gave a low whistle that died in his throat when he realized how many ears this house had. Careful, another voice murmured. Walls learn things. They'll know soon anyway. Know what they already decided to believe. I moved before they could decide I was part of their talk. A young cousin of Marco's stepped into my path with eyes red-rimmed and a mouth trying for solemn. Aunt asked me to tell you the minister's wife is here. Thank you. She says she's sorry for your loss. Tell her I'm grateful. He nodded, pleased to have executed a mission, and vanished into the crowd. I stood alone long enough to feel my knees remind me that they had been locked for hours. I bent them and straightened them and breathed in, until the air tasted less like lilies and more like air. Dante appeared at my shoulder. He did not block my view of the garden. He did not stand too close. He knew exactly how much space to take. You are doing well. Like a trained animal. Like someone who understands the day is not about her, he said. It will be soon enough. I don't want it. You will take what keeps you alive. Your favorite sentence. It keeps being true. We stood that way long enough for a server to approach and veer away. A silver-haired man I recognized by his reputation stopped a respectful distance away and inclined his head to Dante, then to me. He waited. Dante gave him a tiny nod, the kind of permission that looked like nothing and moved entire evenings. The man withdrew. Eat again before the night is over, Dante said, and you keep telling me what to do. You keep refusing until it's almost too late. You don't have to handle me. I handle what is mine to protect. I am not yours. He did not smile. You already know the answer to that. He left before I could arrange a reply. It was an ugly kindness, not making me say something I could not take back in a room full of ears that remembered everything. I watched the rain turn the terrace stones slick and black. The garden lights came on in a soft chain, path to hedge to corner wall, like a promise of order you could follow with your feet. Time slid. I moved through it, stopping where needed, nodding when it mattered, holding the edges of myself together like a dress with a missing hook. The crowd thinned. The noise softened. The staff started to tidy, in a way that did not look like tidying. The last guests pressed my hands and rehearsed their final lines. Near the stair, two men paused. They stood close, voice and breath almost the same thing. He'll claim her. Tonight or tomorrow doesn't matter. He can't afford to wait. He never does. They moved on. The words did not. They hung in the air, then settled across my shoulders like a shawl someone else had chosen. I lifted my chin because I refused to let it make me small. I pressed my palm once to the banister to feel the wood's coolness steady me. In the reflection on the dark window glass, I caught a shape that could have been me or the person I was about to become. The difference was thin enough to slip a blade through. The room breathed. Somewhere in the house, a clock struck a quiet hour. I stood very still and listened to the last of the whispers put their shape around my name. Then I let the sound pass through me and fall away, and I walked back into the crowd with my spine straight, as if the only thing that mattered was how you carried the weight before it learned to carry you. By the time the last car pulled away, the house felt hollowed out. Flowers sagged in their vases, the air heavy with lilies and damp wool. Staff moved quietly, washing the day from glass and wood. I stood at the base of the stairs and let the silence touch my face like cool water. A housemaid stopped a careful distance away with a tray balanced on one hand. "Mr. Romano requests you in the study." Of course he did, and I went upstairs first. The dress had rubbed a raw line along my rib cage. I unhooked the clasp and pressed a cool cloth to my skin. The mirror gave me a version of myself that looked newly cut, edges where softness had been. I could have locked the door. I didn't. Locks belong to doors that matter. Back downstairs, the study door let a stripe of warm light into the hall. I knocked once and went in. The room looked like certainty. Mahogany walls, books in ranks, a wide desk with nothing out of place, a low fire that worked like a heartbeat. The lamps shed a tea-colored light. Rain wrote quiet lines on the tall windows. Dante stood at the sideboard with a bottle and 2 heavy glasses. His jacket hung on the back of a chair. The white shirt turned his shoulders into planes. He poured 2 measured fingers and set one glass near the edge of the desk, the other on the small table by the fire. He looked at me like a man checking a clock he trusted. "Sit. I prefer to stand." "Sit?" The rug had the depth of a promise. I sat near the fire because my legs had started to forget me. He took the chair opposite, elbows on his knees, not slouched, not rigid. The reflected flame ran once along the rim of the glass and vanished. "We will be married within days." I stared at him because it was better than screaming. "You buried your brother this afternoon." "I buried a problem. I am not burying the solution." "You call me a solution." "I call you a fact. Facts attract pressure. Men tested you with their eyes today. They will test the door tomorrow." "Men always talk. They act when they smell blood." "So I am blood." "You are leverage," he said. "Under my name you are not." "My name is already Romano." "Attached to Marco," he said. "His debts are attached to you too. His softness. I will not allow anyone to pull at the thread he left. I am not a thread. You are the seam they will try." The fire ticked. The clock on the mantel breathed. I did not reach for the glass. He did not push it closer. "You despised him," I said. "You hated the way he laughed his way through a mess and left you to wipe it down." I hated that he mistook charm for strength. I hated that he believed the world would go on forgiving him. I kept him alive longer than a man like that ought to last. And yet here we are. Here we are. We let the quiet sit between us. The books watched with narrow gold names. I wondered how many he had read. All of them, probably. The thought annoyed me. "You want to replace him in every room," I said. "At the table, in the mirror, beside me." "I want to remove what made him dangerous," he said, "to you, to the people who believed him. I don't erase ghosts. I keep the living breathing." "You think marriage is a repair job?" "It is a line of defense. It closes a door to men who see an unguarded entry and think it belongs to them. Or it opens a worse door. Uncertainty is worse." "I am not your business." "You became my business when you married into this family," he said. "You became my business the day I watched men look at you and see a seam. This is your idea of comfort, announcing that my value is how I seal your cracks. I did not come to be kind. I came to set terms. Marry you or perish. Marry me so I do not have to break hands every hour for the next year. You expect gratitude? I expect comprehension. Gratitude is optional. Obedience is not." The word flashed through me like a match. I stood before I knew I was standing. "I am not a dog. You are a woman I will keep alive." He didn't stand. He didn't need height to own the room. His restraint worked like gravity. "What are your rules?" I asked, "since you enjoy them." "Do not leave the house without permission and protection. Do not speak to anyone I have not approved. Do not answer calls from numbers you don't know. Eat, sleep, grieve in private. In public, be still and beautiful. Do not make friends with the staff. They work for me. Do not lie to me. I will know. Do not test my patience in front of men who need to believe I never ask twice. You have more. You will learn the rest by watching. I do not write manuals. What do I get, I asked, besides survival? Protection, clarity, the luxury of knowing who opens your door at night. A seat at my side. Rooms where alone is not a weapon. A life that is not simple and is safe enough to live. Safe enough, what a gift. It is more than most get, he said. More than my brother was going to give you. There it was again, the clean line through memory. The correctness made him unbearable. You think this is noble. I think it is necessary. What about what I want? What you want belongs to a different life, he said. So does what I want. We deal with this one. A soft knock. The housekeeper set a tray on the low table and slipped away. Thin slices of roast, bread, fruit, a small bowl of almonds, a glass of water. The door closed without sound. Eat. Stop giving orders like breathing. Breathing keeps you alive. I took the bread because refusing had become a performance with no audience. The first bite unlocked something I didn't want to admit. He watched the way a sailor watches a sky. Not with pity, with maths. You will not cancel his debts, I said. You will just carry them differently. I already have. You will not be asked. You speak as if this is settled. It is. You overreach. I reach as far as necessary. No more. You talk like a doctor who likes his job too much. I talk like a man who intends to see summer. You intend to make decisions for me like I'm a ledger line. I intend to make decisions with your life considered first. When my brother chose, you were a detail. I do not misplace details. You have called me a fact, a thread, leverage, a detail. Under my protection, he said. The words carried weight older than the day. You may not like the sound. You will like the alternative less. I went to the window. Rain softened to a hush. The garden hedges shone. Beyond the wall, the sea breathed. When, I asked, exactly. Soon. How soon? Tomorrow, if I can make it happen. You are insane. I am decisive. That is why this house is still standing. You expect me to stand beside you and pretend. I require presence, not pretense. You think my grief is an inconvenience. I think your grief is real. It will not keep you alive. It isn't meant to. Then let me do it. The words landed without drama. A knife placed on cloth. My body heard the comfort before my mind could argue. I gripped the frame until a small splinter found my palm. What if I refuse, I asked. What if I pack a bag and go? You will not reach the end of the street, he said. Not because of me, because opportunity has been waiting in the rain. You would stop them. I would stop some. I prefer not to have to stop any. You are asking me to choose a prison. I am offering you a fortress. You will learn the difference. How reassuring. You may hate me. The math does not change. Do you hear yourself? You talk like steel and numbers. I talk like a man who has buried men whose names were written on sloppy plans. I will not bury you. You think you get to decide. I do. A small smile found me and surprised us both. It wasn't kind. You think fate calls you for permission. Fate can call, I don't pick up. I could see exactly how men followed him. Not myth. Precision. Why me? I asked. If closing a door is the point, you could pick anyone. You are already here. You already carry the name. The city will not swallow me bringing in a stranger. You have been at my table for years. Also, you are difficult. Difficult women are not useful to my enemies. I couldn't tell if that was insult or compliment. It could be both. All this convenience, I said, and some might call it desire. I desire order. And that is all. He let the space answer. Control again, the one constant. Another knock. One of his men stepped in with a phone on a small tray, posture like a ritual. West entrance reports a car lingered. Plates switched twice. Left when they saw lights on the second floor. Send 2 to follow at a distance. Record, do not engage. The man nodded and vanished. The update slid under his argument like steel bars under concrete. You stage everything, I said, even your proof. I do not stage rain. You are calling me a fool. You are new to the weather. He stood. The part of the conversation that required sitting had ended. He crossed to the desk, opened a drawer, and set a folder on the blotter. My name lay there, a clean line I had signed too often to think of it as mine. You will read these in the morning. You will sign after breakfast. Wear black, it suits the hour. We will go to the courthouse in the afternoon. You plan my clothes too. I plan impressions, they are currency. Do you ever tire? Of what? Of carrying the world on one shoulder and telling yourself it is only a bag of groceries. It is not the world, he said. It is a city and the people in my care. Enough. And me. And you. The fire sank. Lamplight hummed. My bones began to feel their weight. I do not forgive you. I did not ask. I will not forget this. Good. He went to the door and opened it. He did not offer a hand. I passed him and felt the heat he carried, the clean line of it. The hall gave me the long view to the dark window at the end, the portraits watching with their old blank attention. The house had rinsed the ceremony from its corners. I started for the stairs. Isabella. I turned. He stood with one hand braced lightly on the frame, the other loose at his side, face cut by lamplight. You think you are choosing whether to belong to me, he said, voice steady as a pulse. You already do. The door closed. The latch clicked, a small, exact sound. I stood for a long breath with my hand on the banister, watching my reflection wait in the glass like a stranger in a future, then climbed, counting each step as if counting proved the floor would still hold in the morning. Morning made the house look honest. Grief loses some of its theater when the sun comes in at a flat angle and shows the fingerprints on the banister, the smudge on a glass, the heels scuffed on the threshold. Staff moved like low tide, clearing plates that no one remembered touching, opening windows to let the night out. Somewhere on the second floor, a vacuum droned, then clicked off. The air smelled like coffee and rain and lilies that were already tired of pretending to be noble. I dressed in a simple black dress that did not pinch my ribs. No pearls. No veil. I tied my hair back and left the pins in a small dish like metal commas. For a long minute I stood at the window and watched the garden shine from the night's rinse. The hedges looked newly drawn, their edges clean, the gravel path pale as bone. The sea beyond the wall breathed in long blue-gray bands. From here, the world could be reduced to shapes and lines. It felt like a relief. Dante's rules moved through my head in an orderly column. Do not leave without protection. Do not speak to anyone unapproved. Eat, sleep, be still. I was not looking to break anything. I only wanted air that had not been exhaled by 100 mouths. The terrace doors were 1 floor down and a world away from the street. The garden was inside the wall. It would count as obedience if anyone needed me to argue case law. In the hall, a maid passed with a stack of linens pressed so tightly to her chest that the edges looked like they might cut. She dropped a small curtsy out of habit. I hated that. I preferred the women in this house to look me in the eye. It felt less like debt. Downstairs, the morning staff had colonized the edges of the rooms, making order gentle. Someone had propped the terrace doors open, and cool air ran its small fingers along the stone. I paused at the threshold because I had learned that pausing buys you time to see things you would miss if you rushed. The yard was empty, except for a gardener in a green jacket on the far side, kneeling beside a bed of white roses, his back a clean line. 2 security men stood beyond the hedges where they could see the gate and the kitchen door at once. They lifted their chins an inch when I stepped out. No one moved to block me. I was inside the wall. I took the path that curved away from the house toward the U-arch that led to the lower lawn. Gravel whispered under my shoes. The roses on this side were still tight and wet, their petals cupped like small hands. I brushed one with my fingertips and water jumped from it, cold and perfect. For a second I was young, and on a street where mornings smelled like bakery and diesel, and I had believed a life could be built from two people and an address. The vision slipped away. The sea breathed again. Halfway down the path I felt it. Not a sound, a pressure change. The same shift the chapel had made when Dante crossed a threshold. I did not turn immediately. I let the feeling complete its circle around me. Then I looked up. A man leaned on a cane near the far end of the path where a maple spread its branches like an old actor holding a cloak. He wore a dark coat, a shade too light for morning, and a hat with a brim that made the morning less direct. His hair was gray in that careful way that costs effort. His face was familiar in the way faces are when you have seen them sitting 2 chairs down at tables where men tell the truth in the language of omission. Mrs. Romano. The voice carried like a violin note bent toward politeness. He stayed where he was, as if he had learned not to make praybolt. Do we know each other? We share a city. He offered a small smile that had once charmed secretaries out of schedules. Vittorio Sana, old friend of your father-in-law. I sent flowers but thought a word could travel farther. You are on private grounds. A hand lifted, smooth as a shrug. Your gates are an invitation to anyone polite enough to ring first. I rang. The boy in the booth did not know how to say no to a man with white hair. That is not your fault. It is the problem of a city that forgets to teach its boys. You should leave. I will, he answered, still with that courtesy that made refusal feel ungrateful. In a moment. I came to pay respects and to spare you a mistake. I don't accept advice from strangers. We all should now and then. Strangers do not owe us lies. The wind lifted the hem of his coat. The cane was more accessory than need. His balance was excellent. He watched me, as if watching a negotiation that had not yet reached its interesting point. You and your brother-in-law will make news, he continued. People already whisper it. They respect a decisive man. They do not always love him. I did not ask for love. You will ask for air, he said, and find there is none. He puts walls around what he fears to lose. Walls can be mistaken for arms. Arms can be mistaken for love. You are young enough to forget the difference. I thought I might remind you. My chest tightened the way it does when a doctor names a symptom you thought you had hidden. You came to teach me metaphors. I came to tell you that when a man closes all your doors, the one he leaves open is the only one that matters. He tapped his cane once. Freedom is not a view. It is the handle of a door you can turn by yourself. I stepped closer to keep my voice from traveling. Your concern is touching. Your timing is not. My timing is excellent, he said lightly. Your husband collected debts like souvenirs. Not all of them were in money. Some men believed things were promised to them. Men can be very literal when they hear the word promised. You are here to collect. I am here to explain that not all of us are unreasonable, he said. Some of us prefer to make offers where others make threats. For example, I have a house in the hills. No servants who gossip. A view that throws the sea into your lap. You could rest there until the city learns to live without staring. We could arrange details without fuss. No one need be humiliated with headlines or photos in long lenses. You want me to run, I said, and the nakedness of the suggestion lit the garden line by line. And you want me to owe you for it. I want you to have a choice, he replied, as if that was charity and not bait. He will tell you the city is a storm and he is the only roof. Roofs leak. Some people prefer umbrellas. And some prefer to stand in the rain and call it baptism. He smiled, genuinely this time. You have a sharp tongue, it will rust here. You should go. You should make your decision before someone makes it for you. A breath of air pressed cold against my neck, and I knew before I turned that Dante was behind me. He had a way of arriving like the end of a sentence. He stepped at my side with a precision that kept us from touching. Two of his men were a shadow behind the hedges, their attention like a lens cap being slid off. "Good morning, Vittorio." "All mornings above ground are good, Dante." "You rang the bell," Dante went on. "I did. The boy has manners." "My mistake," Dante said. "I hire for accuracy before charm. He will be moved to the gate on the east road." "You think this is a breach? I think this is my garden." His voice did not lift. "You standing in it without an invitation is a problem that will not repeat. You want me to go now?" "I want you to go always," Dante said. "Now is a good start." Vittorio adjusted the brim of his hat with 2 fingers, his eyes pale and sharp, flicked to me and back as if measuring my value by the angle of my jaw. "You have a talent for keeping beautiful things under glass," he said, conversational. "The city likes to see them breathe." "The city likes to see them bleed," Dante answered. "But not today." Vittorio's gaze drifted over the hedges, the wall, the curve of sea. "Iron is heavy. People prefer a lighter hand." "Iron holds," Dante said, and hands let go. "Not mine." Silence took a slow breath. The gardener across the lawn stood, wiped his hands on his trousers, and took himself and his rake toward the potting shed as if weather were rolling in. Vittorio dipped his head, just enough to be called a bow if you were charitable. "If you change your mind, Mrs. Romano," he offered, and the cane indicated the sea, the hills beyond it, the idea of something else. Doors open for those who know how to knock. "Your doors lead to rooms with no windows," Dante put in. "She won't be visiting." Vittorio smiled as if the amusement had been his all along. He backed away a step, then 2, unwilling to turn his back until he had to. And then he did, unhurried, the cane a metronome tapping out the measure of his retreat. The 2 men near the hedge ghosted along the path until the gate was a clean, quiet closure behind him. Ere we turned in a rush, I hadn't realized I had been denying myself. I kept my eyes on the gravel. Dante stood beside me, not facing me yet. He wore no coat. The morning put color into his throat. For a second I hated him for being the kind of man who could walk into a garden and take the conversation in his teeth without raising his voice. "You do not come out alone," he said finally, the words even. "I came for air. You do not come out alone. The gate is a wall. Your men are there." "The wall is an idea unless the men are mine," he answered. This morning the wall had a name and a cane. He walked through because boys who like to be liked forget that their job is not to like. I was inside the garden. "You were in a line of sight," he said. "That is sometimes worse." "You made this a prison," I said, and the word tasted like metal. "Then you scold me for putting my face to the bars. You put your face to a rifle's scope. Are we counting his metaphors now?" "I am counting the number of men who believe an invitation was extended," he said. "Last night a car with borrowed plates waited at the West Road. This morning a man who calls himself polite walked through my hedge. I will not let the city audition outside your window." He turned then, and his eyes cut down into mine the way he uses a knife to cut a fruit into clean segments. I felt the grip of his attention in my pulse. "You will not like my rules," he went on. "You will like funerals less." "That's a neat line. Do you practice them?" "Not the ones I mean," he said. "Those write themselves." "Vittorio offered me a house in the hills," I threw at him because I wanted to see where it landed. "No staff, no cameras, a view." "He offered you an account you would spend the rest of your life paying," Dante replied without blinking. "He does not make doors that open out." "You think I cannot tell the difference?" "I think men like him sell the difference as a feature," he said. "He puts a ribbon on the cage and calls it a gift. Prison or fortress, I still wake up behind a wall." "It matters who holds the key," he said, "and you do." "I do." We looked at each other long enough to feel the world insist on moving around us. A bird hopped from one wet branch to another and shook itself dry. Somewhere in the house a phone rang twice and stopped. The gravel under my shoe gave a small crunch, and I felt it through the sole. A tiny, honest thing in a morning built of strategies. "Do not come out alone," he repeated, softer this time, as if the edge could be taken off without losing the blade. If you want air, ask. You can have the entire coast if you want, but you will take men with you who know what they are looking for. You want me to ask permission to breathe. I want you to be alive tomorrow to resent me for it. I am not furniture. You are not expendable, he countered. That is the only category that matters to me. He stepped closer finally, closing the space that had kept us from touching. He did not reach for my wrist. He did not take my elbow. He lifted his hand and stopped a breath from my arm, the heat of it, like a new sun. You do not belong to the city, he said. You belong to my protection. Do not mistake the garden for a park. Do not mistake courtesy for safety. Do not mistake my restraint for permission to bleed. Something inside me pulled taut. A wire I had not known was there. I hated how my body obeyed the physics of him, how it understood presence the way fish understand current. I took a step back to give myself the lie of control. You have arranged the courthouse, I said. I can hear the wheels you spin when you breathe. Afternoon, he answered. Black dress, hair as it is now. A ring will be arranged later, something quiet. You will eat before we leave. You do not stop. I don't know how. Try. I tried once, he said. The cost was high. You think I am the invoice, I said, something bitter and bright lifting in me. You think if you control me enough, you settle a debt. I think if I control the variables, I can prevent the predictable, he answered, the smallest line creasing at the corner of his eye, not softness, concentration. And yes, you are a variable that other men would like to own. I will not allow it. You cannot own me either. I can keep you alive. Ownership is a word men use when they cannot do that. He dropped his hand then, and the loss of heat was immediate. It made me angry that I felt it. He nodded once to the men by the hedge, and they faded into a different position, as if the garden had turned itself a degree toward noon. Come inside, he said. You're cold. I like the cold. Inside, he repeated, not louder. I didn't move. Not because I wanted to defy him, because my legs had forgotten their orders. He unclasped the top button of his shirt with a quick, precise motion, as if he were making a point to air that insisted on being allowed in. For a few seconds we stood like that, stubborn as two rocks in a stream that learned to go around us. He broke first, not by leaving, but by waiting. He had a talent for letting silence do the work. When I finally started toward the house, the path felt shorter than it had on the way out. He walked half a step behind a wall that moved. At the terrace doors, he reached past me to push one wider, and his sleeve brushed my shoulder. Heat jumped along my skin as if someone had touched a live wire to water. I kept my face still. In the kitchen corridor, staff looked without looking. Dante's presence arranged them into an efficient diagram. He stopped at the threshold to the main hall. Eat, he said. Then upstairs. There are papers to review. You are relentless. I am not sorry. I noticed. He didn't follow me into the dining room. He peeled away toward the study without breaking the line of his stride. I stood at the head of a table that had known laughter louder than mine, and put my fingers on the back of a chair to feel wood steady me. The housekeeper appeared with a plate before I could invent pride. Eggs, toast, a wedge of grapefruit that looked like a cut sun. I ate like someone who might need to run later. When I was finished, I climbed the stairs slowly, my hand sliding along the banister to count out a rhythm my heart ignored. In the gallery, the portraits watched as they always did, their painted eyes calm as winter ponds. Marco's younger face held a smirk I had once mistaken for wit. He had promised me Paris in the spring, a car with a leather interior that smelled like money, a Christmas in a house with a fireplace that would make my mother cry when she saw it. I had gotten pieces. The picture had been lovely in bad light. My room had a view of the garden and the fat, clean line of the sea. I stood at the window again because the morning had not used up its honesty. Somewhere near the yew-arch where Vittorio had leaned, the gardener had left a rake on the ground like a diagonal correction. I pressed my forehead to the glass until it cooled the heat that had gathered there. I thought of Dante's hand stopping before it touched me. I thought of the way he did not smile at his own lines. I thought of the boy at the gate who had let a man with white hair in because the city teaches its boys to be nice and not to be correct. I thought of the courthouse and how black could be both mourning and uniform. I thought of the difference between a wall and a door and how you learn it by sitting alone in a room where the only handle belongs to someone else. I backed away from the glass and my reflection followed, then waited a half beat behind, like a shadow that wanted to negotiate. My throat felt tight. My body was a map of small storms. I will never belong to him. I whispered into the room that already knew I was lying to myself. The words landed and lay still. The doubt rose, quiet and sure, like a tide that agreed to be delayed but not denied. The house held its breath with me, as if listening for the moment when certainty and denial would finally collide and make a sound only I could hear. Morning came with a flatter light, the kind that irons the house into planes and shows every fingerprint on the banister and every smudge on a glass. The lilies had lost their sharpness, and the rugs kept the imprint of last night's shoes. Doors breathed open and shut as staff moved through the rooms, folding the wake into linen and warm water. From the kitchen, the steady scent of coffee cut through the flower-sweet air. The house did not feel like a home. It felt like a held breath. I dressed in a plain black dress that fit without argument and braided my hair back so it would stop falling into my face. The folder Dante had left for me lay on the desk near the window, neat as a threat. I had read every page and understood only what mattered. There would be no gaps. He had made sure of that. In the dining room, he was already at the head of the table, jacket on, cuffs clean, a file open in front of him that he was not looking at. 2 place settings waited. A silver coffee pot gleamed like an instrument. I stood at the threshold and let the room register me. He did not rise, but the air did what it always did around him, and shifted a degree toward attention. Sit. I'm not hungry. Sit. I took the chair on his right because the one directly across was too far, and the one on his left was a lie. A bowl of fruit sat between us, oranges and pears polished until they looked like symbols. A server poured coffee and left a plate with eggs, toast, a little dish of jam the color of bruise. Dante waited until the door closed. Eat. You sound like a metronome. Then keep time. I lifted the toast because refusing would become theater and I had run out of interest in performances. The first bite landed in an empty place that surprised me. He watched without staring, an old trick he made new each time. We leave at 11, he said. The car will pull around at 10:55. You will be ready at 10:50. Is there a playbook I should memorize? There is a list, he said. Black dress, hair as it is. No veil, no pearls. You will not wear sunglasses. Your eyes tell a story the city needs to read. You choreograph grief now. I choreograph impressions, he said. Grief is yours, impressions are mine. How generous. You will not stop on the steps, he went on. You will not answer questions. We will walk directly to the door. Security will control the distance. Do not slow down, even if someone calls your name. I know my name. You know your name, he agreed. They will try to make it theirs. Who exactly? The ones who sell pictures for rent, the ones who sell rumors for protection, and men who think an open door is an invitation. You closed all the doors. I closed the wrong ones, he said. Today we closed the right one. He reached for the silver pot, poured coffee into my cup with steady hands, and slid it toward me. It stopped an inch from my plate as if it had run into a boundary only he could see. I didn't touch it. I expected the familiar spike of anger. Instead, something cooler spread through me. A steadiness I did not want to admit had his shape. You will sign, he said. I read the pages. You wrote a life into lines. I wrote a life into protection. Yours? Ours. You keep using that word. It keeps being correct. The door opened just enough for the housekeeper to set down a small velvet box beside the fruit. The lid was closed. She disappeared before the question could find her. What now? I asked. A crown. A ring, he said. Plain gold, temporary. The city expects signals. I thought you intended something quiet later. This is quiet, he said. The later one will be quieter. I don't want either. You will wear both. You plan my hands now. I plan what the world reads when they look at them. You can write a thesis on me if you like, I said, and it came out lighter than I felt. I'm not a page. You are a message, he said. I send the ones I mean. I opened the box. Inside, a narrow band lay on a pillow of white. It was not ostentatious. It looked like something a practical woman would choose for herself. He had made sure I could not mock it. I closed the lid and left it there. After, I said, before, he answered. We looked at each other across the table we both refused to use as cover. He did not reach for the box. He did not push it closer. The decision sat between us like another course. You will wear the coat with the high collar, he said. It fits you and it reads as winter rather than defense. You are allergic to truth. I present truth as design, he said. It keeps people busy admiring it. And if I refuse the coat, you won't. How do you know? Because you are not careless, he answered. Careless women don't make it this far. My fork touched the plate a little too hard. The sound carried. He did not flinch. A clock somewhere in the hall marked a minute. I finished the eggs because I was tired of being at war with my own body. When I put the fork down, the coffee still smelled like it had promised me something. Any other rules? Do not look back on the steps, he said. People will be behind you. Looking back makes them real. You don't believe in acknowledging reality. I believe in choosing which parts deserve attention. You are exhausting. I am thorough. He lifted his cup and took a sip. The movement was so controlled it felt like punctuation. When he set it down, he angled the file toward himself and glanced at the top page as if reminding the room he could do 5 things at once and none of them would suffer. I pushed the velvet box a fraction of an inch away from the fruit. You have men at the courthouse, I said, and through the building and across the street. You have their names. I have their jobs, I don't need their names. You know mine. I knew yours before you arrived at the church with a bouquet you forgot to water. The memory landed. Me at 21, holding flowers that were heavier than they looked, telling myself I could learn what I didn't yet know. I thought of Marco's hand on my back as we stepped out into a crowd that applauded the idea of us. Dante had stood near the doors and not clapped. He had looked at me as if I had just picked up a set of weights I did not understand. Do you choreograph your own memories? I asked. They don't need it. I envy them. We leave in 40 minutes, he said. If you want 10 alone, take them now. Alone inside a room full of your rules. Alone inside a room no one enters without my permission, he said, and while the words were the same shape as ownership, they felt like something a step to the side of it. That made me angrier than honesty would have. I stood. He didn't. The housekeeper appeared as if cued and lifted the velvet box, then waited for me to nod, before following me out. In the hall, her footsteps made almost no sound on the runner. She stayed a courteous 3 paces behind, and I knew without asking that Dante had set the distance. Upstairs, my room had the same clean blue light as the sea. On the bed lay the coat he had chosen, the collar high, the fabric matte, the buttons like small decisions. Beside it, a pair of gloves. They were simple and beautiful, a trap disguised as care. I touched the sleeve and felt a line of heat race along my skin in betrayal of my brain. The housekeeper hovered with the ring box open in both hands, a ceremony without an altar. Is there a right finger? Left, she said softly. If you'll allow. I put out my hand because refusing her would be cruelty, and refusing him would be childish, and I had already spent a season being both. The band slid over my knuckle and settled like a truth I hadn't chosen. It was cool, then warm. I stared at it as if it were someone else's. The housekeeper adjusted the coat around my shoulders and stepped back. For a moment I saw a woman in glass who looked the way I was supposed to look in this role. It was a relief and a grief. Thank you, I said. She dipped her head. We are ready below. The stairs felt steeper than yesterday. At the landing, I saw the portrait of Marco that the family had insisted come down from the long hall. For now, it leaned against a wall, half turned, as if listening. The mouth in the painting held that irreverent curve I had once mistaken for courage. For an instant, I wanted to run my fingertips along the canvas and ask it what I should do. I kept walking. Dante waited in the foyer, coat on, gloves in one hand, the other hand empty. He glanced at the ring, not at my face, as if confirming a notch on a list. When he stepped toward me, my body forgot to choose between forward and back. He lifted the coat's collar a fraction, not to hide me, but to frame. His fingertips brushed the tendons at the base of my skull. Every nerve there woke like someone had turned on a bank of lights. "Look at me," he said, and I did. Chin up, eyes steady. "Stop telling me where my face goes. Give it a place it belongs," he said, "or they will give you one you hate." "You mean you will?" "I already did," he said, but for the first time there was the faintest scrape of fatigue under the iron, like a man who hadn't slept and refused to notice. The front door opened. Cold air slid in. Outside, the drive gleamed damp and the sky sulked. 2 cars waited. The sedan we always used when appearances mattered, and a second car to parse attention. The lead guard stood near the steps with his hands invisible and his posture calm. Near the gate, a van idled too long. A pair of men leaned like punctuation against a wall they didn't own. Dante moved first. I matched his pace. He did not take my arm. His shoulder created a windbreak the way some men create weather. At the top of the stairs, he spoke without looking at me. "Left side. I can manage stairs. You can manage them better here. Stop pretending courtesy is strategy." "I never pretended courtesy," he said. And for a second, the truth of that almost made me laugh. We descended. Cameras lifted like small hungry birds. I could hear the low electric whir of a lens refocusing, the intake of a breath that wanted to become my name spoken loudly enough to belong to someone else. The guards opened a seam through the watchers and held it open just wide enough for 2. Dante's hand hovered a breath from my back. He didn't touch. The heat of it did. I watched the pavement ahead and did not look at faces. Not because he told me not to, but because I had learned too young that eyes give too much away. "Mrs. Romano," a voice called, soft and urgent like an apology packaged as a question. Another voice tried my first name. Another one tried his. I kept walking. In the reflections on the car's black flank, I saw shapes bend toward us and lean back. The door opened. I slid in. Dante followed, and the car sunk half an inch under the combined weight of decision. The door thumped shut. Sound changed. The world out there was still too bright and too interested. In here it was gray-green and upholstered. The driver's voice came low through the intercom. "Ready? Go," Dante said. The car eased forward. The convoy behind and ahead made a simple shape of authority on wet asphalt. Through the tinted glass, the gates opened on cue and closed after we passed like a mouth finishing a sentence. On the sidewalk, someone lifted a phone and took a picture of the closing. I wondered what story the frame would tell. A black car, a stone wall, a pair of lives passing like a rumor. "Breathe," Dante said. "I am breathing. Make it count. You supervise oxygen now. I supervise what keeps you upright." "You could try kindness," I said, looking at the seam where the door met the frame. "I hear it works on humans." "I prefer what works on wolves. I am not a wolf." "You live in their forest," he said. "You are not prey. Not because of you. Not only," he said. He watched the street the way drivers watch the sky before a storm. The car slid into the rhythm of the city, stopping and starting as if we were part of an enormous creature breathing. People crossed in front of us without knowing who sat behind the glass. A boy in a uniform jacket darted between cars and made it to the median with a grin as bright as a flare. Somewhere a bus exhaled. Somewhere a delivery truck banged its side like a drum. The city did not care about my ring or his rules or our ceremony. That felt like forgiveness I had not earned. "You will walk straight in," he said. "You will say nothing. You will sign. You will walk out. You removed vows from the list." They are not the point. They usually are. They make people feel better about decisions other people made. Today I am the other people. Today you are the person who lives, he said. Tomorrow we can argue about the philosophy of it. You keep saying tomorrow like you own it. I planned for it, he said. It's the next best thing. The car turned and the courthouse rose like a block of good intentions someone had forgotten to make kind. The steps were wide. The doors were heavy. The plaza in front held men who knew how to look without being seen and men who didn't. News vans had mouths open, cables trailing like vines. A woman in a bright coat stood apart, looking like she wished color could make her invisible. I watched the scene come into focus and thought of my mother rinsing apples in a sink, of a friend from school who had moved away because her father got a job in a city where no one knew his past, of a boy who once told me I had eyes like a sentence you finish in your head because you want to know how it ends. Do not look back, Dante said, not looking at me. I remember. Keep your shoulders where they are now. You want to drive me by remote? I want to get you through the door. He reached across the small space and fastened the top button of my coat. The movement was precise enough to be intimate and not soft enough to be tenderness. When his knuckle brushed the base of my throat, heat shot outward like a flare and vanished like a lie. I held still. He didn't look to see what it did to me. That was worse. Outside the car, people were already turning their bodies toward the steps like flowers toward sun. The driver spoke again. On your word. Now, Dante answered. The door opened to air that smelled like cold stone and a little like old paper. He stepped out first. I followed. The world swung its eye. His hand hovered where my spine met the coat. We moved. Whispers gathered as if the plaza itself were deciding what to think. The kind of silence that fills itself with words trailed us all the way to the bottom step. I put my foot on the first rise and didn't look down. At the top, the doors opened as if pushed by weather. We crossed into the shadow of the hall where light strips the face and keeps the rest of you for later. Behind us, the murmurs swelled for a breath and then went thin. Ahead, the clerk waited with a folder that matched the one on my desk at home. Between those two lives stood only the thickness of paper and the steadiness of a man who insisted he knew the shape of tomorrow. I lifted my chin because I refused to let a stranger frame me. We walked forward together, and the doors sighed shut on the whispers that wanted to rename us. The courthouse swallowed sound the way old buildings do, as if the walls had learned to keep secrets. Marble turned footsteps thin. The air held that particular cold of places built for rules. Light poured in high and hard from windows that made everyone look a shade paler, as if the building had claimed a tax from each face. A clerk waited at the end of the hall with a folder the color of dust. She didn't smile. The security men with Dante had already become part of the furniture, planted where their sight lines overlapped. We moved through the metal detector without a beep. Dante didn't remove anything, didn't empty his pockets, didn't perform compliance. The guards nodded as if the machine itself would be embarrassed to complain. A man in a navy suit glanced up from a bench, took in the shape of us together, and looked away too quickly. Two journalists near the door took pictures of the floor. Even their pretending felt loud. The clerk led us down a corridor where everything important had a brass plaque. We passed rooms with half-open doors. Voices came and went, legal and flat. Dante's hand hovered again at the center of my back, never touching, a presence that pushed distance before it. My coat felt heavier under it. I kept my chin up because he had told me to, and because I refused to give the hallway more than I owed it. The ring sat on my finger like a cooled coin. The room for civil ceremonies was smaller than I had imagined, almost ordinary. White walls, a flag, a shelf with a box of tissues no one had bothered to disguise, a window that looked down on a narrow courtyard where a tree grew in a square of dirt, like a prisoner allowed an hour a day outside. The officiant, a woman with silver hair pulled back tight, looked from Dante to me, noted our faces, and made a small check mark in her mind the way functionaries do when they witness things they are paid to witness without applause. The clerk placed the documents on the table, aligned the edges, and slid a pen toward me. My name was printed with a dignity I did not feel. I put the tip of the pen on the line and felt my hand tremble. Not a lot, just enough for the nib to scratch. Dante's hand reached across the small distance and wrapped around my wrist. Not rough, not a squeeze, a steadying. Warmth and certainty traveled bone to bone. I hated the relief that followed like a small animal finding shelter. I drew the line clean, lifted the pen, put it down. The officiant spoke the required words in a voice that had done this too many times to want to give it flavor. Questions formed, answers given. I did not trust my voice, so I nodded where nodding was allowed. Dante answered in syllables that were not soft and not unkind. Words laid like stones in water, practical and without ceremony. A witness arrived because the form required it. A man from the clerk's office whose shoes squeaked, who looked at our faces as briefly as he could and signed where his line waited. The officiant handed Dante a ring for the motion of it, and he touched it and passed it back without a display. When we were told to stand together, he moved close enough that the fabric of his sleeve contacted the fabric of my coat. Heat pooled there, held, and was forced to pretend it wasn't heat at all. It took less than 10 minutes to make something permanent. That fact felt obscene. The officiant stamped what needed stamping. The clerk collected what needed collecting. A paper slid into a manila folder as if it had always wanted to live there. The officiant dipped her chin in a gesture that was not a blessing. The room emptied of the job it had just done and became a room again. We walked back through the hallway. The building tried to make an event out of us with the echo of our steps and failed because Dante would not let it. At the doors, he paused to adjust his glove, and I realized it was a delay to let the exterior security adjust their positions. When the doors opened, the plaza looked brighter than it had. Cameras had multiplied voices too. The air smelled like damp wool and coffee, and the metal of microphone stands. We took the steps. The space on either side of us tightened, then released as the men formed a moving lane with the practice of people who had once shepherded something more dangerous than a pair of human beings. I didn't look right or left. A voice called my name in a tone that tried to be gentle. Another called his as if requesting a comment from a weather system. The weight of the ring was constant. The weight of the coat. The weight of his presence. Near the bottom step, a man reached in with a phone, and the guard's palm touched his wrist with such exactness that the phone changed its mind and lowered. The car door opened exactly when it should. I slid in. Dante followed. The car moved before the door finished closing. A smooth pull. The world outside turned into shapes again, then lines. The first breath I took felt like one I had been saving all morning. It didn't help. For 3 blocks we didn't speak. The silence was not the soft kind. It had corners. I stared at the seam where the door met the frame and saw a version of my face reflected there that did not move. At the next light, Dante took off his glove and laid it on his knee. The other glove stayed on. A small act of imperfection I did not recognize as mercy until I realized I had been looking at his hand instead of the street. I turned on him with a set of words that had been walking in circles inside me since the ring slid down my finger. The first one came out without volume and still felt too loud. You took my choice and it was already gone, and you took it anyway, and I fixed what was broken and you broke it, and I refused to let it break you, and it already did. He looked out the window, then back at me, then down at the glove on his knee, as if everything in the world could be read in those 3 places. If I left you to that crowd and to men like the one in the garden, you would hate me for that too. I would at least have chosen. You would have chosen the shape of the trap, not its existence. You don't know what I would choose, and I know the city. I know what it takes from women who walk out alone. I am not a parade. You are an invitation to men who hear the word widow and think promise. Words collected in my chest, bright and blunt. I could taste the metal of them. The car clipped a pothole smoothly, the suspension smoothing it into nothing. The way this house and this man smoothed everything into the shape they preferred. You staged a ceremony because it was good for you. For us, stop. No. I hate you and good, that will keep you sharp. I wanted to hit him then. Not with my hand. With the truth that lived under all the other truths. It rose and coiled and refused to be said. I hated that my pulse kept count of the inches between his knee and mine, as if the number mattered. The glove on his knee looked like something he had taken off to touch skin he refused to touch. That thought made my mouth dry. You took the part of me that decides, I said finally, low, steady. You can dress it in protection and call it care, but I can feel the hole it left. He did not look at me. His profile was all clean angles and refusal. I took the part that gets you killed when you use it in this city. I laughed once, a sound that was nothing like laughter. Survival is not democracy, he added, echoing an argument he must have had 100 times with men who wanted to vote on their own safety. You keep using words like survival and city and men, I answered. Where do I fit in your grammar? You are the object of every sentence, he said, as if grammar were exactly the language he preferred. I went quiet because too much speaking felt like giving him more material to cut into shape. Outside, we turned onto the boulevard that led back toward the estate. The sea flashed between buildings. A gull cut across our path and vanished. Sun made a brief effort and then decided against the day. The driver's voice came in low through the intercom. Vehicle behind us has been tight since the plaza. 2 lane changes. Same distance. Dante didn't move his head. The glove on his knee didn't shift. Color, he asked. Blue sedan. Aftermarket tint. 2 occupants. No plate on the front. We came up on a line of traffic and slowed. In the side mirror, I saw something that could have been any car. Cars are good at looking like other cars when they want to. The air in the car changed temperature by a degree, or maybe that was just my skin. Call 2 and 4, Dante said, calm as if ordering lunch. Drop back and take the pockets. No contact unless they swing. Yes. The intercom clicked off. I could feel the engine waiting under us like a big animal that breathes slower when you put a hand on its neck. For a long half-minute, the world returned to its routine. People crossed against the light and did not die for it. A woman argued into her phone with her palm pressed to her ear. A bus flyer peeled at the edges in the damp and flapped 2 words over and over that meant nothing to me. The radio clicked once to let us know the shadow cars had adjusted. Dante didn't look back. His attention stayed forward, cataloging angles, speed, the stupidities of other drivers, the opening at the far side of the next intersection. He existed most comfortably in the space where all future possibilities were being measured. They're not stupid, the driver said. They know they're seen. Then they'll try to sit on our bumper and make us nervous, Dante answered. Or they'll peel off in a way that lets them tell themselves they chose to. Either way, we don't give them what they came for. What did they come for, I asked, though I already knew, because the knowledge had made a cold circle in my stomach as soon as the intercom rose. To measure, he said. To follow you out of a door, to see if the ring is a rumor, to take a blurred photo, and sell it to someone who thinks blurred is a kind of truth. I pictured our car in someone else's screen, a bubble of gray in a field of gray, circled later with a red oval to prove a point. My name, in a caption that could be anyone's. The idea of being used that way made me angry in a way I could admit without shame. I turned my face toward the glass and watched the blue sedan maintain exactly the distance a cautious person might. The restraint was almost admirable. Our shadow cars slid into the gaps behind and to the side, made of the same paint and engine, invisible as kin. The line of traffic loosened, and then tightened again, a breath that didn't finish. 2 blocks from the turn toward the estate, the blue sedan eased over a lane and reduced speed by a fraction, as if the driver had remembered an errand that was suddenly urgent in the opposite direction. It took the next right without a signal. One of our cars drifted past without interest. Dante tapped 2 fingers once on his knee as if marking the end of a measure. He lifted the glove and pulled it back on with a single clean motion. The intercom clicked. Do we follow? The driver asked. Keep eyes on the street we're on, Dante said. They want attention. Today, they don't get it. Yes. We rolled forward. The city resumed being a city with 1,000 small ambitions, and the occasional sharp one. My breathing felt too loud in the car. He turned his head then and looked straight at me, not at the ring, not at my coat, not at the mouth I had used to throw hate at him, and felt worse after. He looked as if trying to measure whether I understood not his power, but the slope of the world he believed in. This is why you belong to me now. Evening took its time arriving, as if the day had to be exhausted before darkness would agree to come in. The house never quite warmed after the courthouse. Lamps threw polite circles on the floors. The staff spoke in low tones that made the rooms feel padded. Somewhere down the back hall a door closed too carefully, like someone trying not to wake a child. The ring had warmed to my finger and no longer felt like a foreign object. It felt like a fact. I went to my room and stood for a long minute at the window. The sea was a strip of graphite. The garden held the last light in its clipped edges. What had happened lived both in my body and somewhere just behind me, as if memory refused to sit in the same chair. I took off the coat and the gloves and smoothed the dress as if pressing the day flat. A small tray had been left on the table with tea and something sweet, the kind of gentle that annoys you on days when gentleness cannot fix anything. I poured and did not drink. A knock came, a measured rhythm that belonged to houses like this. The housekeeper stood with her hands folded and her expression mild. Mr. Romano requests you in the study. I looked at the clock and then at the tray. She waited without looking at either. I'm occupied. He asked that I tell you now. Of course he did. She dipped her head. When the door closed, her absence left behind a small current in the air, like a draft through a keyhole. I stared at the tea until it cooled, then at the ring until it shone without light of its own. The walk to the study felt longer than it had in the morning, even though my feet knew exactly where to turn. The portrait hall watched with its usual composed boredom. Marco's painting had been moved to the far end and hung again, as if it had never leaned against the wall. His painted eyes had been instructed to behave. The study door stood open 2 fingers. Firelight made a low sound. I hesitated at the threshold because I did not want to give him the pleasure of watching me cross into the room as if I belonged there. I went in anyway. He stood at the desk with a thin stack of papers reading, not pretending to be surprised by my arrival. The lamps picked out the exactness of his shirt and the shadow at his jaw. He closed the folder and laid it down. The room inhaled and waited. You should have let me finish the tea. Drink it here. Then bring it. He did not move toward the decanter or the kettle. He took the seat near the fire and left the one opposite open. I stayed standing because my body needed the height. He studied my face as if mapping wind direction. Sit. No. Then stand where I can see you. I shifted to the edge of the rug and kept my back straight. The ring flashed and then hid as my hand found the other. He watched that too. You have more rules, I said. You always do in the evening. I have to get you through the night. I get myself through the night, not anymore. I went to a courthouse and signed because you told me to. You won today. You don't need the encore. I don't play encores, he said, and it was true. He played sets and left the stage while people were still deciding what they felt. You erased him, I said, the words arriving before I could dress them. You watched a priest say words and you watched men bring flowers and then you replaced him in his house, at his table, at my side. You wrote him out of the story and called it protection. Marco wrote himself out, he said, and you wanted to write him out. I wanted to keep you alive. You keep using that like it makes everything else reasonable. It makes everything else necessary. At the courthouse, you didn't even look at me when they asked for vows. I looked at the one person in the room who could make it binding. You looked at a clerk and not your wife. I looked at what mattered, he said. Binding keeps you breathing. And love is an inconvenience. Love is a word men use when they don't know how to do the work, he answered quietly. I do the work. The room hushed itself in the pause that followed. The fire settled with a soft fall. Outside, the wind moved a branch against the glass in a small, dry sound. I took a step toward the desk and planted my palm on the polished wood. The grain was smooth and cool. I imagined what it would look like if someone finally lost their temper enough to mark it. "You keep telling me the shape of the world as if I haven't been living in it," I said. "As if I married into this family and didn't learn the language. As if I haven't already paid for the lessons. I know what men in vans want. I know what a picture sells. I know what a rumor does when it gets thirsty." "You know enough to know this is not about humiliation," he said. "It is about survival. You did not have to make me your property to accomplish survival. You are not property. You said I belong to you. You belong to my protection. You shoot grammar like bullets and expect it to save you." "It saves you," he said, "and it cages me." "Good," he answered, and the word hit like the flat side of a blade. "A cage is the only thing that keeps certain animals from reaching you while I sleep. You always sleep. Less when you go walking in the garden. You think I didn't notice the way you looked when you came into the garden today," I said. "As if I had misbehaved. As if you had to punish me because someone else could not be controlled. You gave a man with a cane reason to think he could tell you where to sleep," he said. "That is my definition of misbehavior." He offered me a door. He offered you a leash with the buckle hidden in silk. You think your chains are better because you call them walls. "I think a wall is honest," he said. "It does not pretend to be love." The anger inside me found a sharper edge. I moved my hand from the desk to the back of the chair I refused to use. "Do you hear yourself? You stand here and say love is a word and vows are paperwork and survival is a headline you can manage. And then you place your hand a breath from my back every time I walk down a set of stairs like you are holding me up with nothing. That is not nothing. It feels like ownership. It is attention. It is control." "Yes," he said, not flinching. "Control is the difference between walking into this room tonight and a phone call from an emergency ward I would burn down after I left you there." The desk gave a soft complaint under my grip, and that made him move. He crossed to the far side and laid both hands on the blotter, leaning a fraction, the way a storm leans a tree before it breaks it. The fire painted a low line along the buttons of his shirt. The silence in the room tightened as if bracing. "You accused me in the car of taking your choice," he said. "You were right. I did. I will keep doing it on days like this. Your husband liked to decorate his choices with pretty words and women who laughed at the right times. He left a trail of debts and apologies that ended where they had to. I am not making your life a tool. I am making your life a result." "A result of what?" "Of my refusal to lose." "To what?" "To men like the one in your garden. To journalists who turn your face into a currency. To mistakes that repeat themselves because no one had the courage to stop them before they became habit. You confound arrogance with courage. I prefer results to style." He straightened then, and the decision that had been building all afternoon reached its mark. His open palm came down on the desk once. Not theatrical, not for show. A single clean strike that made the ink bottle hop and the pen quiver. The sound traveled through the wood and up my hands and into my bones. It startled the fire into a spill of sparks. It startled me into stillness. He didn't raise his voice. The strike had done that for him. "You think I enjoy this. You think I wanted a courthouse and a lane of guards and a ring chosen for strategy. I wanted a brother who didn't put you at the edge of a photograph with your eyes asking for air. I wanted a city that didn't require this version of me to make it through winter. I have neither. You have me." Something in the back of my throat went hot and far away. For a long beat we only looked at each other, unwilling to move first in case movement turned into collapse. The study had always been a room for making demands. It felt like a room where gravity had learned a new trick. I didn't realize I had walked around the desk until the corner of it brushed my hip. He was close enough now that the heat of him met the heat rolling off the fire and made a small weather system between us. He did not touch me. He let his height do the work. "Do not mistake this for love," I said. though the sentence cost me more than any today. Do not take what my body does in your space as consent to be rewritten. I am not asking for love, he said, the words so low they belonged to the coals. I am asking for your survival. You enjoy the sound of that sentence too much. I enjoy knowing you will wake up tomorrow. You enjoy being the reason. I enjoy the certainty, he said. If the reason is mine, it is not left to chance. You cannot control everything. I can control enough. And when you cannot, then I break whatever I have to until I can. I should have stepped back then. The line between us was too narrow. Heat made breath an effort. My skin knew exactly where he was, where his hand would be if it closed, where his chest would meet mine if gravity had its say. I hated that I knew. I hated that I could draw the distance with my eyes closed. The hate felt like a rope that burned and kept me from walking away. Move, I said, because the air had thinned to the point of argument. He didn't. He looked down once at the line of my mouth and then at my throat, and then back to my eyes as if each place he chose not to touch was a sentence only he could read. The restraint felt like a pressure. It made me dizzy. When his hand lifted, it rose only as high as my shoulder without landing. The heat of it unspooled along my collarbone like a wire. I don't need your love, he said. I need you alive. I will be the man who makes that true until you are strong enough to do it without me. The room swallowed something I would not give in front of him. I turned my face so that the angle of it cut the light, and hid the part of me that wanted to fall forward into heat and have it mean nothing except the end of a long day. His breath moved once and stopped. He was losing control of the same weather I was. The knowledge steadied me. Step back, I said, and he did. One measured pace exactly. The air loosened. My lungs remembered their job. The fire readjusted and calmed. Tomorrow morning, he said, as if reminding me of an appointment. 9. We review the schedule. You will not use the main line. Your calls route through the office until I sort what stays and what goes. You're dismissing me. I am releasing you to your room, he answered. Eat, sleep, bolt the door if it makes you feel like the handle is yours. Does it matter? Yes. I walked to the door without letting the shakiness touch my legs. At the frame, I stopped and looked back because not looking would have been more dramatic than I felt. He had returned to the desk and stood with one hand on the blotter, the other loose at his side. The lamplight drew a line on the edge of his jaw. Don't bring me into this room to make me smaller, I said. If you bring me here, it is because you want me to be the thing you keep claiming I am. What is that? Alive, I said. He nodded once. Not power. Recognition. The hallway was a tunnel of softer light after that. I passed the portrait that refused to change expression and wondered if the painter had ever liked him. The stairs rose like a set of choices you could make in the right order if you tried. In my room, the tray had been replaced by one with a covered plate and a glass of water. The window held a reflection of the garden in night that was almost the same as the real thing. I took off the dress and pulled on a silk robe that had the weight of rain. For a minute, I sat on the edge of the bed and held my own hands like they belonged to someone I had to talk into calm. The ring flashed once and stopped. My skin still remembered the measure of that narrow space in the study, the exact heat, the particular line of his restraint. I hated that memory, wanted to nurse it. I stood and went to the window. The garden lights cut small paths through the dark. The U-arch looked like the mouth of a story. I put my palm on the glass and felt the cold travel up my wrist. In it was the quiet that comes when the day admits it can't go on. I will never want him, I whispered, not to make it true, but to hear the shape of the lie. The words made no echo. The body I lived in knew better than the voice that lived in it. The knowledge felt like guilt and like relief. I lay down and turned my face into the pillow and listened to the house. Old wood, water in a pipe, a car passing outside the walls, distant low voices where men discuss how to hold the night. Sleep did not come fast. When it did, it came like a concession. Downstairs, the study kept its own hours. Dante poured 2 fingers into a glass and watched the fire long enough to learn nothing new from it. A man came to the door and waited for a nod before speaking. Update from the West Road. The blue sedan belonged to a shell. No owner to talk to. We have a face from the passenger seat. Low level. Works for Sana sometimes. Leave him alone tonight. Understood. And the boy at the gate? Move to the East Road. Give him a man who will teach him to say no. Yes. The door closed. The room returned to being a room where decisions sit in piles waiting to be turned into orders. Dante stood alone in the slice of lamplight and watched the shape of the glass in his hand. His shoulders had not dropped all day. They did not drop now. He took a drink and let it burn with purpose. She will learn. Morning pressed the house into neat angles and careful sounds. Doors stood open just enough to listen. The scent of lilies softened into polish and coffee. The rugs showed a faint record of last night's shoes before staff brushed it away. Even the sea beyond the garden kept to its lane, a narrow hush against stone. I stood at the mirror and watched the light flatten everything it touched. My face, the line of my braid, the small gold circle that now lived on my fingers if it had always been there. It had warmed to my skin. The comfort of it felt like a betrayal I couldn't wash off. Footsteps paused outside my door and moved on. A cart rolled, a muted wheel against the runner. 2 voices murmured at the landing and went quiet when they realized the house could hear them. The housekeeper passed with napkins folded like white birds and dipped her head. I could not tell if it was apology or obedience. The dining room had been laid like a diagram of order. Coffee, toast, eggs, fruit, silver angles. Dante sat at the head of the table with a file open and a pencil lined with the paper's edge. His jacket fit like purpose. He was not reading, he was looking at the window as if the glass could be trained. I took the chair opposite him. It was petty. It still pleased me. He lifted his eyes. Nothing else moved. Eat. I'm not hungry. Eat. A server poured coffee, set down a plate, and left without a whisper. The door closed with the small click of a house that knows how to keep secrets. I broke the toast because empty hands would look like surrender, and the crisp sound felt too loud. The taste was nothing. Dante's pencil touched the page and drew a short line as if to mark the start of a day he had already decided. Your schedule, he said. 2 meetings here, 1 canceled. Eastgate gets a new man. He knows the word no. You replace boys with men and call it order. I replace mistakes with rules, they hold longer. Until they don't. Then I replace the rules. He spoke as if listing weather, security, deliveries, bills that wanted paying and hands that wanted shaking, names of men who would come by the back road and leave by the front. He did not mention the ring, the courthouse, the fight in the study. The omission scraped against my ribs. His composure scraped more. You talk like last night didn't happen. Last night happened. Today requires work. You enjoy that word. It keeps you alive. You enjoy that one more. His gaze flicked to my hands. The ring caught a slice of light and threw it back. He moved the pencil half an inch and stopped as if rewarding it for patience. You will go nowhere today, he said. Not the garden. Not the chapel. More movement than I prefer outside the walls. You lock the doors and still complain about the weather? I count variables, doors are 1. You sound like a man who courts paranoia and files it by color. I sound like a man who has lived long enough to use what he has learned. I lifted the coffee, let the heat touch my lip without drinking, and set it down to the right of the saucer just to make the table imperfect. He watched the move and returned to the page, not because he was done with me, but because he thought I would learn more from the lack of a reaction. 10 minutes in the chapel, I said, alone. No, I don't need a guard to sit in a pew. You need a guard to walk through a doorway. There are no cameras in there. There are eyes everywhere else. 10 minutes. You can have 5 here, he said, door closed if you insist on privacy. You are generous. I am careful. He turned the handle of the coffee pot toward me, did not pour, then did pour, and set it down at an angle that would have bothered him if he were another man. He was not that man. He had better uses for his discipline than metal and alignment. I left the table without asking because I did not want the small victory of being told yes. In the foyer, staff traded lilies for white roses with the soft certainty of people who could do the work blind. I slipped into the small sitting room off the hall and closed the door. The quiet there felt like a child's hiding place. Curtains kept the garden framed like a polite painting. The air smelled faintly of old wood and furniture polish. I sat and counted my breaths until my pulse agreed to behave. When I opened the door, one of his men stood at the angle of the hall that made his presence look accidental. He straightened, not military, just correct. "Madam." I said nothing. I walked the long route on purpose, past rooms I had been told not to linger in. The library breathed leather and dust. The office next to it hummed with a small machine, eating and spitting paper. In the service corridor, a basket of folded napkins sat on a stool like a white cake. I stepped to the kitchen threshold and watched the undertow of work. Steam lifting from a pot, clean glasses catching light, a clatter quickly smothered. A cook's assistant glanced up, then away, the practice trick of people who need to be invisible without moving their feet. I moved before I made her life harder. Dante had been right about one thing. I did not plan to make enemies of anyone who fed me. Back in the main hall, Marco's portrait watched with its painted smirk. For a moment I met the young man on the canvas and felt the thin line between guilt and relief, where memory keeps its blade. I lifted my chin, not because Dante had told me to, but because the painting had. Dante had not moved when I returned. The file had disguised itself as a new stack. The pencil lay at an angle. The coffee was still hot. He watched me cross the room and stop at the far edge of the table, as if he had been measuring the geometry of my patience. "You will not use the staff corridors," he said. "Not again." "Why? Is there a dragon?" "There is a habit I prefer to avoid." "You mean privacy." "I mean rumors. They eat more than food." "I'm tired of being a page in your manual." "You are not a manual. You are a mirror. The house will reflect what you do." "And what will you reflect?" "Control, until you manage it yourself." "You think I can't?" "I think you have not had to." "That is convenient." "It is accurate." He stood the room adjusting around him. He rounded the table and stopped an arm's length away. His hand lifted and paused, and I felt the air shape ahead of his fingers. He touched a loose strand at my temple and smoothed it back into place. The gesture was not tender. It was competent in a way that heated skin. He let his fingertips ghost along the curve where neck becomes jaw, not touching, only close enough to be felt. "Posture," he said, "I don't need coaching. You need to be read the way I want you read." "By who?" "Everyone, always. You make me a billboard. I make you a wall. I hate your walls. They hold." He withdrew his hand and the echo of heat stayed like a brand without a mark. I stepped back and let space fill in. He took the measure and made no note of it. "I want the staff list," I said. "Names, positions, where they are at night." "Later." "Now." "Later." "You cannot control every minute. I can control the ones that matter." "It matters to me." "That is not the metric." "It is my life. It is my job," he said. "Eat." The word fell dull. I sat because refusing would hand him another chance to call me childish. I ate because my body had begun to ask for fuel like a traitor. He watched long enough to know I would finish, then wrote a number in the margin without breaking the lead. The morning wore me down with tidy tasks. People arrived in quiet cars and left with paper folded small enough to hide in a palm. Security shifted like a chessboard moving itself. Twice I opened a door I wasn't supposed to and found only a broom and a pail, as if the house had grown new closets to absorb my defiance. Once I reached for the French doors and met the gaze of a guard who did not move and still blocked the world. He did not need to speak. The glass did it for him. By noon, the house had pressed me into a shape I resented. I went upstairs and leaned my palm against the cool window until the cold climbed my wrist. The garden held the exact green of money and patience. The yew-arch drew a soft mouth into the hedge. Two men crossed the lower lawn and disappeared into the shed. Their shadows were more efficient than their bodies. The sea was a strip of steel, and the sky had no time for our story. I changed into a softer dress because I needed to choose something. I let my hair down to prove a point to no one. It made me look younger than I felt. 2 pins refused to lie straight. When I came down, lunch waited with a soup that smelled like someone else's childhood. The housekeeper stood near the door with her hands folded. "I want a list of staff names," I said. "I prefer to know the people in my house." Her eyes flicked toward the hall and back. "I'm asking you." "Yes. Today. By afternoon." It wasn't what I wanted, but it was more than nothing. I ate the soup and hated being grateful. Dante appeared in the doorway with quiet that rearranged wood grain. "2 changes," he said. "Lawyer moved, florist stays, photographer canceled." "You hired a photographer." I dismissed him. "You make decisions for both of us like I'm a room." "I protect the room, I put locks on the windows. You also choose the curtains. They keep out weather." "You blame the weather for everything. The weather is real, you prefer stories." "I prefer choice. Real choice looks like paper you sign because you plan to wake up tomorrow. You keep teaching lessons no one asked for. I keep you alive." The florist arrived and whispered Latin, then smiled at my dress and asked about a vase like a poem. I told her white roses only. Cut everything that begged for attention. Dante watched from a distance with the focused stillness that made other people behave. I ignored him and chose what I wanted. It felt like winning a hand in a game I had not agreed to play. I found the housekeeper and pulled her into the small reading room behind the library. Dust lifted in a thin halo where the light cut in. The door closed on quiet. That tasted old. "I want to know who stands where at night," I said. "Not guesses. Facts." She hesitated, not because she lacked the knowledge, but because she was counting cost. "Mr. Romano's rules are for the house," she said. "He trusts me to run it. And I need to know who runs me." "You run yourself, Mrs. Romano. Too many people insist otherwise." She lifted her eyes. Respect arrived late, like a guest who chose the right time. She spoke 2 names, then a third, and told me where the men stood, which doors they preferred, who was new, who remembered the old ways, who had sisters, who sent money home, who was too polite to be useful. It was the outline of a map, not the map itself. "I want it written." "It is not wise." "I didn't ask for wise." She nodded once, a small courage. I stepped into the hall and almost into Dante. He did not look at the closed door behind me. He looked at my face for as long as it took the moment to pass into history. Then he stepped close enough to fix my hair again because the pins had given up. "Hair down tonight," he said, "the dress with the narrow sleeves, the collar that sits soft." "No." "Yes. I'm not putting myself on your stage. You are coming to dinner. You will arrive at 7. You will walk with me. You will sit to my right. I'm not a prop. You are my wife," he said. "You are the only person in a room who doesn't need a job description." I will not smile. Good. It reads as grief. Use me less. "I would prefer not to have to," he said, and the clean weariness under it almost made me believe him. But allies prefer the idea of order. They will see it. "You could leave me out." "They would write a meaning for that too," he said. "I prefer to assign it myself." "I won't wear that dress." "You will. You don't own my closet." "I own the impression. The dress is a detail. You can't choreograph me forever. I can choreograph tonight." He reached past me to the light switch and touched it with a finger that did not hesitate. The room brightened. The move put his body close for a breath. Heat and the clean scent I couldn't name. My heartbeat had traveled to my throat and lower lip. I did not step back. I refused to give him that measure. "Do not talk to staff alone unless necessary," he said. "Not jealousy. Houses like this listen. Men prefer not to be caught at it." "So the walls have ears?" "They have careers." "You trust no one." "I trust patterns." "And me." "I trust you to do what you believe is right," he said, "and to confuse it with what feels like freedom." "You think I don't know the difference?" "I think you will learn it," he said. "I would like to be alive when you do." He could have touched my cheek again and didn't. The restraint worked on me like a stronger touch might have. He stepped back the smallest degree, handing the air back as if it were a favor. It annoyed me more than an order would have. "What time?" I asked, making the concession sound like theft. "7," he said, hair down, narrow sleeves, no necklace, the ring is enough. "Stop dressing me. Stop resisting what keeps you intact, save your big defiance for when it counts." "I decide what counts." "I hope so," he said. He left. I stood with my back to the books until the anger moved through me like a fast storm over a small field. Then I went upstairs and opened the closet and looked at a row of dresses that pretended to be choices. I picked the one he'd named, not because he had named it, but because losing this skirmish might buy me a later win. The fabric slid over me and settled. The sleeves kissed my arms like a soft discipline. I took the pins from my hair and let it fall. I wore the ring and nothing else. In the mirror, the woman staring back belonged in these rooms in a way the girl who had carried flowers once had not. The click of that realization was clean and frightening, like a door closing in a frame built for it. At 6:45, the housekeeper arrived with a neutral face and a posture that made no promises. I followed her down. The foyer glowed without showing effort. The new white roses were bright as small moons. Dante waited at their edge, a dark axis around which the air arranged itself. He looked at me like a man checking a plan he wrote yesterday and found intact. He lifted his hand toward my collar, paused, and let it fall. The decision not to touch warmed my face like a confession I didn't want to make. "Ready?" "No." "Good, it reads as grief." "You are insufferable." "I am correct, walk with me." We crossed the hall. The corridor to the dining room took 2 turns and a breath. His palm hovered at my back, like a low flame. I kept my eyes forward. The room beyond hummed with people lowering their voices. The moment before entry hung like a curtain waiting to rise. He leaned the smallest fraction toward my ear. "Tonight you attend as my wife." The words landed clean and heavy. My skin tightened as if the air had cooled. The door ahead shifted, a breath before opening. I hated that a traitorous part of me knew I already looked like exactly that. The corridor bent toward the dining room and the sound of low voices braided together before falling quiet. Light pooled just past the threshold, catching on silver and glass. His palm hovered near my back, not touching the warm outline of a boundary. The doors opened as if the house had drawn a deep breath. Faces turned and held. The room was made to be looked at. Tall windows faced the garden and turned the night into a mirror. A long table ran the center like a road everyone had to use. Candles drew a soft spine of fire down the middle. Family and allies filled the chairs in neat ranks, suits that meant business, dresses that meant intent, jewelry that signaled someone else could afford the sparkle. I knew some faces from photographs and nights where deals were dressed as charity. Others wore the practiced blandness of importance. We crossed the room at a steady pace. His presence arranged the air. A chair to his right waited the way a door waits for a key. He drew it back. The scrape on the floor was the only sound anyone allowed. I sat. He took a seat. The table resumed breathing. Wine appeared, dark and cool in thin-stemmed glasses. The first plates moved like secrets delivered correctly. A server's sleeve whispered, a spoon chimed once, and then the room settled into the polite talk that keeps knives from flashing too soon. At the far end, an older man rose with a glass, posture clean as bone, hair white in a way that didn't weaken him. To the family, to peace after storms, to those we remember and those we keep. Glasses lifted. The word storms had weight. My fingers tightened on the stem and loosened before anyone could see. Dante's gaze clipped to the old man and back, a line acknowledging rank, without surrendering to it. He drank without looking at me. The room followed his cue. Food passed. A woman in pearls asked if the lilies were lasting this season. I told her they were, if cut late. A nephew brightened, as if I had given him a trick. 2 chairs down, Luca Ferretti adjusted his cuff and let an easy smile settle. He had the kind of face people called open until they learned better. "Good to see you here," he offered, low enough to be polite, loud enough to be placed. "It steadies the table." Tables steady themselves. Some need a hand. Dante rotated my glass a fraction with the pat of his finger. Hardly a touch, somehow a command. Heat moved up my spine in a slow wave. I kept my expression quiet and used the fork in front of me like I knew what was being asked. Stories were told because stories are a safe way to announce power. A cousin laughed about their grandfather bargaining at the harbor in a language he didn't speak and winning anyway. Rented laughter rose and sat. Men compared notes on schedules and shipments without naming ports. Women translated the room into compliments. The old man listened the way a captain listens to weather that might change. An aunt near the middle turned her perfected face toward me. Swift this strength, after the loss. The room didn't stop. It paused. Forks hung in the air as if rehearsing their next move. Luca didn't look up, his smile thinned by a hair. Dante gave the aunt the courtesy of his attention, no more. Not a glare, a reading. The kind of look that says the consequences will be arranged later, if necessary. She drank to hide the swallow of that lesson. The conversation resumed with a careful hinge. Between courses he leaned an inch toward me, almost nothing. More shift of heat than gesture. Left hand on the stem. Stop. Not tonight. He withdrew the inch. He understood restraint the way other men understood sport. The plates changed. Candles shortened. A name slid into the room sideways, wrapped in talk about an estate out by the hills and a dinner that might happen there, couched in boredom, carrying edge. Senna. It passed under the table like a draft. The old man's napkin found the table with exact care. Luca's eyes went from the wine to nowhere in particular. Dante did not react. His stillness taught the room how not to make the name real. Dessert arrived plain and beautiful. Fruit cut with admiration. Small cups of coffee that could keep a person's secrets. Dante's hand touched the back of my chair for a breath. It felt like a seal pressed onto warm wax. My shoulders took the shape he wanted. When the hour softened enough that people could rise without starting a new scene, I stood for water. I kept my movements unremarkable. In the corridor, the light was practical again. A mirror caught a slice of my face and offered nothing I wanted. From the anteroom near the bar, voices threaded into the hall and snagged. Top line only, you know who to copy. Don't put names in text. Or I'm not an idiot. Then don't act like one, he watches everything. He can't watch a whisper. You sure he can't? A clink, a practiced laugh. What about the window if she steps outside? No window, not now, he sleeps with one eye open, the other is a camera. Delivery tomorrow, named after flowers, he'll check the card, she'll read the handwriting. And then we see a breath of doubt travels faster than a man. I stepped back into the corridor shadow and let my face become still. The mirror beside me returned a woman who looked like she had walked into a room for the wrong reason and remembered something burning on a stove. Luca appeared as if conjured by that thought. Hands up a fraction. Apology without touch. Careful corners hold things you don't want. Like mints. Like knives. I let a half-smile settle and treated him as one more piece of furniture with eyes. Back in the dining room, Dante's chair was empty for a blink that lasted too long. He stood at the far end with the old man, both slightly turned. A private circle that gravity respected. I took my seat. The aunt's pearls threw a small, moving moon on her throat when she laughed at something safe. He returned without hurry. He reached for his cup and didn't take it. He looked at me with inventory, counting what I might have picked up and what I might drop. I leaned a breath toward him. Bar. 2 voices. Tomorrow. Delivery named after flowers. Hills. Top line only. They think whispers outrun you. Which flower? They didn't say. What handwriting? The kind that wants a woman to think it's personal. His gaze slid past me to the thin mirror near the corridor. A man stood there pretending to care about a framed photograph of a harbor, the posture of someone who had practiced being nobody. Dante's attention touched him like a hook and let go. The nobody evaporated into the hall. He drank from his cup to make the room feel normal. His hand found my chair again, an unmistakable pressure. Finish your coffee. You're cold. I am awake. They think you can't watch whispers. They forget who built the room. Luca's eyes were careful. Careful eyes are useful until they aren't. People rose by degrees, the room loosening into clusters. The old man drifted by and placed a dry palm on my shoulder for a fraction. The weight of it felt like a permission and a tax. Luca approached with that easy mouth. He stopped at the polite distance, hands folded as if to keep them. Congratulations, strength suits this table. Strength looks different depending on where you stand. It does. May you find the angle that returns it to you. That sounds like a riddle. An old wish in a younger voice. His gaze touched Dante and slid away before it could be accused of lingering. Dante allowed the exchange to exist without acknowledging it, which was its own kind of warning. Luca bowed the smallest bow and moved toward the anteroom, absorbed by 2 men who made a neat gait of shoulders and then broke it. Coats. The word left Dante like a switch. People took it up without knowing they had. Chairs sighed. Good nights were spoken like currency. The room packed itself into manageable pieces of loyalty and interest. We moved out under portraits that preferred the wars they remembered to the politics in front of them. In the corridor, the mirror caught Luca in profile near a stranger's shoulder. Lips barely moved. Eyes did the work. Dante's hand found my arm, a touch that arranged the air and my pulse. Outside the doors, the foyer handled the last of the evening's theater. The housekeeper appeared with a wrap I didn't recall surrendering. She placed it over my shoulders with economy. Men with jobs turned themselves into background. The old man nodded at Dante, then at me, and let history bundle itself into that gesture. In the small pocket of privacy before the foyer pushed back, Dante's eyes met mine. Whatever heat he had kept for the table had left. This wasn't anger. It was the temperature of water right before ice. Stay within reach. I heard enough. You heard what they wanted you to, he said. The rest is being handled. You don't even know which one. I know the room. I know how a mouth bends when it lies politely. That describes half of them. It doesn't. The foyer swelled with movement. A guard approached, question on his face, answer already dying when Dante saw him. Another turned a fraction and spoke into his sleeve like a man deciding which door to open in the dark. Somewhere a phone went silent before it learned how to ring. I thought about the men by the bar, the word hill shaped like a trap. A delivery called flowers, a handwriting designed to pull me down a path. I thought about how quickly he had turned a scrap into a map. I hated the part of me that found comfort in that. You're going to do something, and I already did. What? Finish your good nights, then walk. He broke away to let relatives kiss the air near his cheek, and men repeat promises they had made before dinner. He absorbed it all, without giving anything extra. The old man's driver opened a door and Knight took the car back. Voices thinned, then spread into the soft echo of a large house ending a long scene. Luca shook hands with a man whose name I didn't catch. Their expressions were the kind you wear when you want to be unremarkable. Luca's smile missed the beat by a breath. Dante's self-control sat on him like a well-cut coat. Under it, something sharpened, and he touched the back of my arm, a brief wait that turned into a direction. Walk. Cold air found my throat on the steps. The cars waited like answers lined up on a test you didn't want to take. The garden's dark was tidy at the edges, as if shadow obeyed. His men looked where he would go before he went there. I matched his pace. Anything else would have turned into a spectacle I wouldn't give them. At the edge of the stairs, he leaned close enough to warm the inch between us. "Stay where I put you, this part is mine." His eyes held a second longer than courtesy, patience gone still, a blade under clean ice. The night pressed its hand against my skin, not unkind, just firm. The car door opened, a dark mouth. I got in. The door closed. The last warmth of the room fell away, leaving the clarity that whatever had begun with a whisper would not stay won in a house where his attention meant consequence. The ride back to the estate had the soundless pressure of deep water. Streetlights slid across the glass like measured thoughts. His men's car settled behind us, and another found the pocket in front, a neat diagram of protection that pretended to be traffic. The city let us pass without testing us. I kept my eyes on the seam where door met frame and counted breaths until counting felt like obedience. He watched the road as if it owed him truth. "You think they'll try the delivery?" I asked. "They will. They like a performance with a ribbon. You'll intercept it. I already have men at the florist and at the road that leads to the hills. You never stop. I don't know how. Try it. I did once. It cost too much." "What did it cost?" "A lesson I won't repeat." I turned my face to the window and looked at my reflection riding over the dark. The ring flashed like a lighthouse only I could see. The car dipped into the lane for our street, and the estate rose quiet and squared. Gates opened and closed the way a mouth swallows a promise. He spoke without turning. "When we go inside, you go to your room and wait. If anyone but me knocks, do not open. You expect trouble. I expect men to chase their own courage and call it opportunity. Is this about Luca? This is about anyone who thinks a whisper outruns me. You sound proud of that. I am responsible for it." The car stopped under the eaves. Night lay flat on the garden and lifted only where lamps made small islands. The door opened and cold air slipped into the car. He stepped out first. I followed, and the air took away the last of the evening's warmth with a clean hand. We crossed the foyer without needing words. Staff became edges and doors. His men ghosted to their places. At the foot of the staircase, I paused. He didn't touch me. He didn't have to. Go. I took the stairs without turning on the light, trusting the wood to remember my feet. The hallway held its breath. My door waited like a safe answer on a test. Inside the room threw back the day at me, the dress on my body, the hair he had ordered down, the ring whose weight had learned my skin. I put the wrap on a chair and stood at the window until the cold, through the glass, made my bones wake up. A knock came that was not a knock, a rhythm I had already learned. "Come." The study took his shape the way cities take the river that cuts them. The fire hummed low and steady. Papers sat where they had been touched last, not scattered, not waiting. He closed the door behind me and the sound felt like a sentence ending. "You should be in your room," he said. "You requested me." "Yes, then you have my attention." "Good. Keep it." He walked to the desk and rested his palms on the blotter. Not anger, not yet. A line drawn with the body that told the room where it had to stand. I stayed by the chair near the fire because the distance let me breathe. "You wanted the chapel this morning," he said. "You wanted the staff list. You wanted to walk corridors that exist to make work easy. None of those wants are crimes, and none of them are harmless." I was careful. Careful caught a whisper tonight and held it just long enough to bring it to me. "You did well. And you will not do it again alone. You can't lock every door. I can lock the ones that lead to rooms where you bleed for someone else's story." I laughed once short. "You think all the danger in this house has a name and a phone number? No. The most dangerous things have neither. That is why I write rules with a heavy hand. Stop writing me into them like a child. You are not a child. That is why I expect you to understand cost." The word cost moved between us like a coin passing palm to palm. "I'm not an invoice you balance. You are a life I balance against weather," he said. "The city is wind. I build walls. You make yourself the only roof, and I make myself responsible for the night." He pushed away from the desk and closed the space between us in a measured step. He didn't reach for me. He took the air and made it specific. I felt the heat off him and hated the shape it carved through me. At dinner, his voice went lower. "You held yourself where I needed you. You heard what I needed. You moved when I told you to. You did all of that while hating me for asking. I don't remember agreeing to be proud of this. I don't need your pride, I need your survival." "Say it again." "Say survival like it forgives everything." "It doesn't forgive anything," he said. "It just keeps you here long enough to argue later. You prefer quiet houses, you call it peace, and I prefer houses where the people at my table are not targets." I braced a hand on the mantel to keep my face from giving away the heat that fought under my skin. "You warned me not to go to staff, not to talk in corners, not to look out windows. You critique how I hold a glass. You tell me which dress is useful. You make me a message and a wall, depending on what the room needs. And then you stand a breath away and expect my body to pretend none of it matters." He leaned in until the fire and his heat met somewhere between us. His hand went up to the wall next to me and braced there, palm flat, not touching me, close enough to let my skin know what would happen if he did. The air narrowed. I could count the thread in his shirt at the cuff. I could count my own pulse. "It matters," he said softly. "I know exactly how much." And then stop. "No. Move back. No." We held like that long enough for the fire to complain and settle. My mouth tasted like metal. The part of me that hated him stood shoulder to shoulder with the part that recognized the strength in his refusal and despised itself for it. "You are not property. You say that while putting me against a wall. This is a warning, not ownership." "A warning about what?" "About the distance between anger and stupidity," he said. "You will be angry. Good. Keep it. Don't spend it where it buys you a photo and a hospital bed. You're very good at scaring me. I am very good at telling the truth you already know and are trying to forget." He lowered his head the smallest fraction, just enough that his mouth was close to my ear without touching. The words warmed the skin there and moved through bone. "No window, no corridor alone, no deliveries you did not request, no signatures that do not pass my desk. Speak to whomever you like when I am present. Otherwise, wait. You are asking for obedience, and I am requiring it." I looked up into his face and saw the patience there, the kind that survives winters and choices. Something else sat under it for a flash, thin and bare. Loneliness. He closed the door over it before I could decide if I had really seen it. "You were going to marry me either way," I said, "because admitting anything else would break something I needed. You like the power more than the responsibility." "Power is what people call responsibility when they don't want it," he answered. "I take it anyway. Because you enjoy it, and because I know the cost of letting someone else try. Of Marco, of others." His mouth tightened, not grief. A line driven into rock. "Do not confuse my restraint for absence of feeling," he said. "It is what keeps me from cutting away every risk until there is nothing left to protect. You like sharp metaphors, and I like sharp tools." He stepped back then. Not far. Enough air returned to remind me what breathing felt like without him standing between me and oxygen. He looked at my hands. The ring shone with firelight, and something inside me flinched, not from shame, from recognition. "Tomorrow," he said, "there will be flowers. They will come with a card. The handwriting will want to sound like a memory. You will not touch it. You will not read it. You will tell me, and you will let me end it." End it how? Cleanly. That word held more edge than any threat. I stepped off the hearth and put the chair between us to make a small border that felt like dignity. "You will hurt whoever brings it, and I will remove the option for them to bring it again. All this for a card, and all this for you," he said. I stared because there was nothing clever to throw at that. The fire breathed. The study kept track of both of us like a ledger that would not forget the debt. "You warned me earlier," I said. "You told me to stay where you put me. Do you expect me to be grateful?" "I expect you to be alive enough to hate me tomorrow. You keep assuming there is a tomorrow with you in it." "There is," he said, "even if you refuse it. That is what my job does. It keeps time moving for both of us." I went cold at how much that sounded like a vow he didn't need a church to anchor. "Let me go," I said. "Not leave. Just stop arranging me. I will not stop arranging the world around you until it stops looking for ways to use you against me. I'm not leverage, and you were the moment Marco brought you home." There it was, the scrape of his name across both of us. I felt the old mix of affection and shame and pity and anger tighten and vanish. I put a hand on the chair back and held on. "You replaced him everywhere," I said, "and then you act offended when I notice." "I replaced his mistakes with my habits. That is the only reason you are arguing with me in this room instead of being discussed in another by men who like to pretend courtesy is mercy. You think mercy is weakness. I think it is a luxury after the work is done." The silence that followed felt thick enough to lean on. Finally, he inclined his head, the way a man accepts a cost that cannot be avoided. "Enough for tonight," he said. "Go to your room. Bolt the door if it makes the handle feel like yours. If anyone knocks, do not open. If a card slips under the door, kick it back into the hall and call my name. You expect me to call? I do. And if I don't, I will be outside the door anyway." The admission landed between us like a coat he wasn't going to wear but wouldn't let the weather have. He moved to the desk, lifted the phone, and pressed a single button. A voice answered somewhere inside the system of the house. "West Road," he said. "No deliveries past the outer gates without clearance from me. Not flowers, not parcels, not paper that looks like a child drew it. If a driver asks to sign, keep him talking until I get there. If he runs, we let him run and follow his shadow." A pause. Another order, quiet enough that the room hardly noticed. "Luca leaves by the south exit," he said. 2 cars behind. No lights. No contact unless he turns toward the hills." The call ended. He set the receiver down as if it were part of the room and would remain where placed. He looked back at me, and the iron returned to his face with the calm that always changed the air. "No one touches you," he said. "No one questions your place. Do you like saying that? I like making it true." He opened the door and stood aside without touching the handle. The gesture wasn't courtesy. It was authority expressed as quiet. I walked out because standing there would make me feel like a child. The hall felt colder than the study, but kinder. My feet remembered the stairs and took me up without asking my opinion. In my room, the night lay along the floor in a long, shallow pool. I undressed and put on the silk robe that remembered my shoulders better than I did. The mirror showed a woman whose body knew exactly where he had stood and hated the accuracy. I went to the window and pressed my palm to the glass until the cold made a circle on my skin. The garden held its small lights. Somewhere beyond the wall, an engine turned over and decided not to move yet. I thought of the bar voices, of hills and flowers, of handwriting meant to bait. I thought of his hand braced on the wall by my head and the inch he refused to cross. I thought of the thin flash of loneliness I had glimpsed under the iron and how fast he had hidden it. "I will never love him," I whispered. The sentence tasted like a lie and like a promise trying to survive inside a house that preferred facts. Sleep didn't come. It arrived the way a guard approaches. Slow, alert. One step, and then another. When it took me whole. Downstairs, the study folded back into work. A man appeared in the doorway and waited until permission existed. "The florist?" "Closed for the night," the man answered. "A second shop near the hill road opens early." "Park there," Dante said. "Quiet. Watch for drivers who like to change plates. If a car tries to find this house, it loses its way." And the whisper. He looked at the fire, at the slow patience of the coals, at the way heat can keep its own counsel. "We pull the thread and see who follows it," he said. "No noise, no broken glass, no headlines." "Understood." The man left. Dante poured a measure into a glass and didn't drink. He stood in the middle of the room and let the night say what it had to. Then he spoke to the house the way he spoke to the city, quiet and final. "No one touches her, no one questions her place. Morning arrives slow, like the house wants more time to think. The light is thin and gray, flattening corners showing fingerprints on the glass, turning the water in the carafe to a dull coin. I lie still and listen to the hush that follows men who work at night. Pipes tick, boards breathe. Somewhere a door closes with care. The ring on my finger is warm before I remember to resent it. I roll it once, stop, and let it sit like a truth I haven't learned how to refuse. The garden beyond the window is clipped and obedient, hedges combed, gravel smoothed. The sea looks narrow, a strip of iron under a sky that is not convinced by the idea of day. In the hall, slippers and soft shoes write polite sentences the walls agree to keep. The house moves as if it owes someone silence. I dress in black that doesn't demand attention, and braid my hair because hair that falls into my face makes me feel younger than I am. The mirror shows a woman who slept in a room that belongs to a different version of her. I touch the glass and leave a small print that mist takes in its mouth and erases. Downstairs, the dining room is set like a plan. White cloth, coffee, fruit cut, to look more precious than it is. Dante stands by the window with his hands behind his back, uniformed by restraint. He is not looking at the file on the sideboard. He is looking at the garden as if the day will confess something if he watches long enough. Eat. I'm not hungry. You will be. I'm not your project. You are my responsibility. The server pours coffee and departs as if a curtain has been drawn across him. The door decides for us how loud the morning is allowed to be. I sit, because refusing would become theater, and I have learned to keep my audience small. Toast. Egg. The kind of plate that anticipates no argument. He doesn't sit. He reads the windows. West Road is manned, he says. The florist near the Hill Road opens early. We are there. Gates stay shut. You choreograph the street the way you choreograph me. I keep what I can in time. You are exhausting. I am thorough. He turns enough for the light to cut his jaw clean. His eyes go to my hands, to the ring. He does not look at my face until he has finished counting everything else. Stay upstairs today, inner hall if you need to walk, no chapel, no terrace, no windows that open. You want me wrapped and labeled. I want you intact. You want obedience. I want you alive. I eat because anger burns fuel. He leaves the room like a decision collected and filed. The house accepts the order and continues breathing. Hours roll forward. The staff move like a single thought. Trays appear and vanish. Flowers migrate without admitting it. A guard stands where stairs make shadow and practices looking like part of the wood. In the portrait hall, Marco keeps his curved mouth and careless eyes. I stop in front of him and try to decide if I owe him grief or only history. The answer moves when I reach for it. I keep walking. From the landing, the gates are a dark line with intent. Cars pass as if by coincidence. The sky holds to its dull plan. A worker bends and rises and bends again on the far hedge, the day using his back to tell time. The housekeeper crosses below with folded napkins and glances up not at me, but at the idea of me. In this house, ideas take up as much space as people. Mid-morning drags into noon. The clock in the hall counts it out like good manners. I sit in the chair near my window and tell myself I am not waiting. When the van appears, it is plain white, correct plates, the kind of clean that wants to be trusted. It slows at the gate and holds itself as if it knows how to pose for the eye that lives in a lens. The driver leans out and lifts a bouquet with one hand and an envelope with the other. A show of sincerity delivered through glass. Even at this distance, I recognize the script. Loops trained in school when you still believe perfect penmanship is a currency. My name written like a private thought. I stand, and the air in the hall goes thin. Footsteps below adjust into formation shaped by habit. The gate does not open. Two of Dante's men peel from the places the house keeps for them and cross the drive in a line. The driver tests a smile he has used before. It reaches his mouth and stops. The men speak with their bodies. The driver steps out of the van in one piece, his cuff frayed, his dignity rehearsed. I take the stairs. The housekeeper meets me at the base with a shake of her head, hands empty, authority borrowed. Don't move. Please. I'm not asking. The foyer opens, glass bright, brass polite. I stop at the door because the door does not belong to me. The driver stands where the drive curves. A man has the bouquet cradled like a fragile thing. White roses hold something darker buried deep. A ribbon is printed with my name in that looping hand that wants to be known. The envelope sits on top, daring the world to tell it no. Dante's reflection joins mine in the glass and subtracts some of the light. He does not touch the door. He is the reason I cannot open it. He tilts his head a fraction toward me. No. I want to see it. You already see it. I want to read it. No. Trust me. I trust nothing about bait. Bait. It uses your name like a caress. It could be nothing. It is never nothing. He opens the door because he chooses to, not because I need it. Air spills in and resets the room. We cross the threshold together. His hand does not touch my back. My body still feels where it would be if it did. The men hold the driver with respect. That is not kindness. The driver looks at me with an expression he thinks will work. He has practiced. He will fail. Dante does not honor the man with a glance. He takes the envelope from the roses and holds it between two fingers. He does not read it. He holds it until the paper understands it is only paper. Give me that. No. It has my name. He has used your name. You use it more than any of them. I earn it. I want to read the card. No. I reach. He lifts the envelope a small inch above my palm. Refusal measured to draw heat. Ink blooms where the pen paused at the stroke of an L. The loop has patience. It belongs to someone who knows attention is currency. Don't do this, Gem. I am doing it. You put yourself in the mouth of a trap and call it control. I call it choosing the danger we invite. You think standing between me and the stairs is noble. I think keeping you from reading this is survival. Anger rises and my voice drops because volume here is currency I refuse to spend. You enjoy the prison. I endure it. You enjoy the keys. I enjoy the locks. They work. I am not a door. You are the house, he says, and the city wants deeds. His nearness bends the hallway. The roses lift their scent as if perfume can cut steel. I think of Marco curling a ribbon around his finger as if that counted as care. The memory is a picture behind glass. It does not help. If you burn that, I say, eyes on the envelope, you burn my choice with it. I burn the illusion that you have one here. I can read without dying. You can live without reading, he answers. I accept the cost. For me? For both of us. He pushes the door wide. The men move. The driver disappears around the side of the house and does not vanish at all. The bouquet passes to another man's hands. The van idles like a patient animal. A car goes by the gate and stares without seeming to. The wind fails to commit to being wind. We step back into the foyer. He doesn't make me stop. My body stops anyway. He holds the envelope where I can see it and lifts it. So my name faces me. You will not read this. Don't. You will not carry it into your room and turn it into a story about control. I hate you. Good. Hate keeps your eyes open. He produces a lighter from a pocket I did not know he uses. The small click is final. A flame is born, clear and obedient. He tips the corner of the envelope into it. Heat licks paper. Brown curls. My name darkens and buckles. He holds my gaze while the card becomes smoke. Change is quiet. It smells like perfume corrected by fire. Stop. No. You have nothing to prove. I prove this to myself, he says. And to anyone watching. Who is watching? Everyone. The seam singes where a kiss sealed it. The paper surrenders, crumbling black, falling in a whisper into the silver tray on the table. He closes the lighter, as if it prefers to be closed. Smoke climbs to the beam and decides to stay. You burned proof. I burned a line they want you to cross. You burned my name. I refuse to let it be borrowed. You enjoy this. I enjoy this ending, he says, not the other one. What is the other one? You, with a look in your eyes a man can use. You think ink does that? I think this city can turn a leaf into a knife. He steps close enough that I feel the heat of his body like a lamp turned toward me. It is not comfort, it is accuracy. You break me to keep me whole. I break their tools, he says, I leave you standing. You make yourself the only tool left. I make myself responsible, that is different. Not from here, from everywhere else. We are still. Somewhere a footstep waits and does not fall. The housekeeper appears at the edge of the room and looks at the tray as if she is considering a stain that will not be removed yet. She does not look long at me. Respect is a cloth she places over both of us without asking. You will not read anything I do not clear, he says. Not a florist's note. Not a letter that sounds like memory. I am not your patient. You are the person I refuse to lose. I close my eyes because seeing him feels like agreeing with him. The idea of the handwriting glows under my lids. When I open them, his face is near enough to remake the air, not touching, burning by restraint. It unsettles me more than heat would. He knows it. Do not mistake this for triumph, he says. It is a line and I drew it. You think I wanted you to win. You want your life to stop being a message, he answers. You want your name to belong to you. You want me to stop using you as a wall. You hear well? I hear you, he says, even when you whisper. He positions himself so the door is no longer urgent. Outside, a man learns how to speak into his sleeve without moving his mouth. The van coughs, catches, settles. Do not walk toward the steps, he says. It reads wrong. I am not an invitation. You are a sentence certain men try to finish. I will not let them. He signals without motion. The bouquet appears again, heavy and perfect, ribbon obedient. He nods once. It leaves the room toward a sink, not a shrine. On its way out, the ribbon looks at me and asks to be romantic. It gets no answer. Go upstairs. No. You are shaking. I am standing. Both. I am tired of truth as a weapon. I am tired of lies disguised as gifts. We look at each other until the stairs look less like surrender. I turn and climb. Halfway up, I look back because not looking would be theatrics of a different kind. He stands in the center of the foyer, one hand at his side, the other empty, the tray at his elbow with the ash pretending significance. His face is a decision. His eyes hold something between war and a vow that needs no church. From the landing, I see the driver pass toward the side yard between two men who have learned how to hold without bruising. His head is down, his steps obedient to the ground. A car slides by the gate with the confidence of a man who loves watching other people live. The housekeeper moves the tray 3 inches to the left, not to change its story, only to claim the table back from it. The smell of smoke thins and leaves behind roses corrected by heat. In my room, I close the door and lean against it, an old habit that feels like a small religion. The chair by the window receives me the way it did this morning. The garden returns to ordinary. I take off the ring and place it on the table, stare at the pale circle, and put it back on because the absence is worse. My braid has loosened near the temple. I smooth it and hear his voice correcting posture. I hate the way my body obeys without being asked. The day settles around its burned center. Distant engines make decisions and change their minds. Birds unwrite their paths and write them again. Somewhere beyond the wall, waves put their weight against stone and do not expect it to move. I count breaths until counting stops feeling like obedience and starts feeling like possession. A measured knock lands on the hall and moves away. Downstairs, a door closes in the study, the kind of sound that ends a scene. I stand and go to the window once more and place my palm on the glass. The print blooms and fades. The vow he made without words lingers in the air like smoke that will not leave. It smells less like roses now. It smells like iron and ash, and a promise too heavy for ribbon. Evening settled over the estate like a lid. Lamps woke one by one in long corridors, soft circles of light that kept the walls from speaking too loudly. The staff moved as if the floorboards had been warned to hush. Dinner trays came to my door and left untouched, then returned with a single cup of broth, as if negotiation might be easier if it smelled like thyme. I drank half because my hands had started to tremble in a way that annoyed me. Voices gathered below, knit into a low current that traveled along the baseboards. The study doors were closed, but the house carried the tone of men who had learned to measure, not shout. I left my room and went to the landing where the rail widens and the portrait hall meets the stair. From there, sound climbed in careful pieces, a name, a date, a street. A paper slid across wood. Chairs adjusted themselves and stopped. I moved down one step and then another until the niche outside the study held me like a shadow. The door stood a finger wide. The fire inside made that steady hush it makes when it has been told to behave. Dante's voice was a line drawn with charcoal. Dark, precise, refusing flourish. Driver didn't know the handwriting. Santa's runner passed him the envelope with cash. Meet point near the hill road. Drop if no open gate. Another voice, one of his men who had the habit of folding truth before handing it over. Receipt from the florist names the bouquet after a saint. Not common. It's on 2 previous orders this month. Who signed them? Initials only, LF on the pickup. Delivery paid cash, small bills. Silence that meant the room inhaled together. The fire settled. I remembered the way Luca had stood near the bar at the dinner, smiling with a mouth that missed the beat by half a second, speaking softly to a stranger who studied a framed photograph as if art could absolve him. Dante again, calmer than the word deserved. Phones. Luca's burner pinged near the florist before dawn. It slept by the old train spur 3 nights this week. Same quadrant Sana uses for short meets. The bar. Cameras show Luca and a man we know as Santa's bookkeeper. 6 minutes. No contact after. Separately, a cousin of his texts a number in the hills about a dinner, family style. A chair leg scraped once. The sound felt like a blade laid on wood. Bring him. The hall outside tightened as 2 men moved. Their steps carried the shape of habitual obedience. I stayed in the niche and watched the study door the way you watch a sky that has decided whether it will rain. Luca came between the men with his hands visible, palms easy, the set of his shoulders made of a careful kind of relaxation. He wore the same brand of patience he had brought to the dinner table. His eyes found the floor first, then drew themselves up as if to meet a friend. The study admitted him and swallowed the men behind. The door did not close all the way. It didn't need to. The house was an accomplice. Dante did not stand to meet him. He had already occupied the room the way water occupies a glass. He indicated a chair with a fraction of a glance. Luca sat and let his hands rest where authority could see them. You've had a busy week. I help where I can. You helped the florist with a saint's name. A cousin asked me to pick up a bouquet, family business. You know how it is. The cousin whose text set a table in the hill. Dinner is not a crime, depending on who eats. Dante picked up a folder and placed it on the desk without opening it. The gesture said the paper was proof, but not necessary. Luca's eyes touched the folder and returned to Dante's face, then traveled past him and found me in the doorway niche. He masked the recognition poorly, not because he lacked skill, but because the sight changed something in his story, and he needed a second to rewrite it. Dante didn't turn. He didn't need to. His awareness moved and enclosed me, an invisible hand that positioned me where the room would read me as present and untouchable. He spoke again, with more air between the words. You were seen near the florist before dawn. You met a man in a bar and used 6 minutes to say what had to be said. You signed 2 pickups with initials you thought would mean little. You told a runner that a breath of doubt travels faster than a man. Luca's mouth flickered in a shape that wanted to be a smile, and landed as a wince. People say things in bars. They do, Dante answered. They also say them into phones they bought with cash and kept too close to their old life. Luca looked back down at his hands, at the rings that had not saved him from deciding badly. He tried to put tiredness on like a coat. I did what I thought the family needed. Pressure was building. A widow with a ring and a Don with a quick signature. People worry. They talk. Santa listens. I gave him weather, not maps. I never put a blade in your back. You put a rumor in her mouth. Talk travels, you know that. I didn't open the gate. You drew the arrow to it. He said nothing. The fire steadied. An ember collapsed with the small grace of heat adjusting itself to remain. One of Dante's men placed a small black phone on the desk, the kind that breaks when dropped and costs less than a decent dinner. Next to it, a folded receipt with the saint's name and the lazy initials. Next to that, a photo printed from a camera in a bar that had seen too many stories dressed as toasts. In it, Luca leaned toward a man with a pleasant, nothing face. Their mouths stood still. Their eyes worked. Dante let the silence absorb the items until their existence felt embarrassing. He did not tap them or shove them forward. He let them live there. You fed a man who likes to test fences with other people's daughters. Dante continued, voice level. You wrapped the bait in a ribbon and wrote a name that didn't belong to you. Luca's eyes came to me again, softer, as if practicing an apology in a mirror. I meant no harm. You meant leverage, Dante said. You meant to hold a candle to the window and see who came to look. It was a nudge. It was a door. Luca leaned forward a fraction to occupy more space with his story. Dante, you changed the house in one sweep. You closed the soft places Marco left open, and men who used to eat at this table arrived to find the plates gone. They worry about what a man like you does to people who cannot keep up. They wanted proof you would bend. I thought if he saw a crack and you sealed it, he'd stop testing. You burn a card, you send a message, he loses interest. You aimed a threat at my wife and call it a message to a rival. I aimed it near her. You trust luck to measure near. I felt the word wife pull through the room and snag on the corners of furniture. It changed the shape of the air near my skin. I hated the part of me that took shelter in it. I hated the part of me that understood why shelter mattered in a house that collects enemies like lint. Dante angled his body so that his shoulder and chest made a barrier between Luca and where I stood. It wasn't theatrical. It was geometry. He used angles the way other men used volume. The small, controlled motion pressed heat into the narrow space where my breath lived. The pulse in my throat found a rhythm and held it. Luca tried again. I am loyal to the name. I have been since we were boys, taken to shake hands we did not understand. Loyalty is not a mood. It is a choice. I chose to keep the city from tearing you apart before the family could catch up. You chose to write her name on a piece of bait and set it near my front door, Dante said, and the softness left the sentence. You chose your convenience and called it strategy. A long, slow beat. Luca's eyes traveled again to the door, to windows, to corners where exit routes sometimes grow like vines. They found none. He looked back at the desk, and then at Dante and made the smallest tilt of his head, a gesture that suggested regret without paying for it. What will you do? Teach you the difference between weather and map. You could be merciful. Mercy is for after the work is done. And the work here is to keep her name from being currency, Dante answered, finally turning his face fully toward me and then back to him. And to remind this house that there is no profit in selling pieces of her life to men who like to sharpen rumors. He stood without haste. The posture of the room changed to accompany him. Two men moved a fraction closer, not touching Luca, closing air around him. Dante placed a hand on the back of the chair where I would have sat if I had been the kind of woman who chooses to sit in rooms like this. He kept the other at his side, fingers still. You will explain to me on paper every path that rumor took, he went on. Every mouth it visited, every number it touched. You will write until ink loses its taste in your hands. You will tell me whose shadow you used and which of them thinks their shadow is still useful. Luca stared at the folder and then at the pen laid on top of it. He did not reach yet. He had one more old habit to try, You owe me forgiveness, he said softly. I've held doors for your name that Marco never could. I have eaten insults meant for you, and I didn't return them when I had the power to. Dante's mouth twitched in a way most men might have mistaken for a thought about rain. I owe you clarity, he said. Forgiveness is for churches. This is a house. He nodded to the man on Luca's right. The chair shifted back. The pressure of 2 hands on Luca's shoulders read as escort, not violence. He stood with that same careful grace, as if the body were hoping to teach the room how civilized it could be. He looked at me once more and tried to return my name without speaking it. I gave him nothing to catch. They led him toward the door that opened to the east corridor, the one that ended in a room without windows where men learned the limits of their games. As they passed me, Luca dipped his head a fraction, a gesture that pretended to honor while measuring distance. Isabella. The sound of my name in his mouth felt like a draft. Dante's head turned a degree toward him, then a degree back toward me, like a compass needle remembering itself. He stepped closer, and the space I occupied belonged to him without touching. I did not move. The heat of him made the study smell more like firewood, and less like paper. Luca vanished into the hallway. The sound of his steps went down the long strip of wood and died in the place where light no longer bothered to travel. The study exhaled. The men who remained took the chance to breathe in slightly larger portions. Dante gestured to the desk, and a map unfolded itself to the surface, creases waking like old scars. A finger traced a road near the hills. 2 circles. A square that had once been a warehouse before it turned into a church, before it turned into nothing useful. Instructions moved like cards across the table. West Road doubles back after the spur, he said to the men. 2 cars behind Luca, no lights, no contact unless he turns toward the hills. Bar staff who pour for him are bought for the night. The runner who paid the driver is a thread. Pull him. Quietly. If the florist gets a second saint, I want the invoice before it has ink. Agreements in low tones, the language of people who had done this before and would again. I stepped away from the door and entered the room fully. No man moved to block me. They didn't need to. Dante's presence managed their instincts. He turned to face me, and what had been iron in his expression became something colder. The anger he wore was not heat. It was a slow, deep thing that had learned patience. You stand where you are told not to. You drag men here in the night and expect me to wait upstairs and pretend I'm a fold in a curtain. You think I wanted you to hear your name coming out of his mouth. I want to hear it with my own ears so it isn't only a rumor. You want to test the edges of the room until you bleed, he said. You are not a knife. How would you know? I know where steel lives, I know where it doesn't. I crossed to the hearth because the fire felt like a small argument I might win. Heat on my shins, the kind that makes the body confess how cold it had been. He didn't close the distance. He changed it by standing very still until the air bent toward him as if it owed him something. Luca used me because you let him, I said. You worked the room at dinner like a conductor. You saw him and you saw me and you let it play. I saw him and I saw you and I made a choice that got you here alive. You enjoy the word alive. I prefer it to what I don't enjoy. You terrify me, I said, and the words left me before I could dress them. You terrify me more than men like Sana. He did not flinch, not at the comparison, not at the admission. He stepped toward me then and stopped with one hand braced flat against the brick, inches from my shoulder. Not touching, making heat out of restraint. The house gave that space a name and waited. Good, he said, voice low and clean. Fear keeps you sharp. It isn't only fear. I know. You shouldn't know. I do. We were close enough that I could see the precise shave at his jaw and the single dark place he had missed near the curve of his ear. It felt obscene to notice it. It felt like proof that the body notices what it wants and the mind can only file complaints. My pulse gave up its dignity for a count of 3 and returned in a better suit. Men like Luca will keep trying, I said. They believe the house will go back to the soft shape they learned to use. They will send flowers. They will write names. They will make shows of love with knives in the wrapping. They will, he agreed. And we will keep burning what they send until they learn fire belongs to us. I do not pretend you are a piece I can move without your weight. You move me anyway. I move the room, he said. You choose how to stand in it. I took a breath that felt like someone else's and held it until it calmed. The house listened in the way old houses do when words are about to leave marks. The men at the desk pretended to study roads, and in their pretense, there was respect. You frighten me, I said again, quieter now, as if the room would carry it to places where it could be safe. He didn't smile. He set the line of his mouth into something that admitted both weather and shelter. You should, he answered, voice barely above the hush of the coals. And you shouldn't. Both truths belong to you now. The words settled over the map, over the folder with a saint's name, over the phone that had thought it could live without an owner. The corridor carried away the drag of footsteps that meant Luca had reached the door no one liked. The study lowered its light a fraction as if sparing the eyes. Dante lifted a hand as if to touch my hair and stopped a breath shy of it. The restraint burned hotter than contact. In it was anger, and a vow, and the hard mercy of a man who had given up the quiet life to become the law a city would accept. My heart beat once in a way that told me my body had learned a new language it refused to translate for me. Go to your room, he said, softer. This part is mine. I didn't move. I let the heat from the hearth tell me what it could. I let the weight of the night confirm what I already knew. The danger in the hills had a name. The traitor in the house had a face. And the man between them had hands he refused to use where I could see them. The fear that lived under my ribs shifted and made room for something I didn't have a word for. It felt like iron heated without flame. It felt like not being the widow of anything at all. Night lays a quiet hand over the house. Lamps dim to coins. The long gallery turns into a tunnel where portraits keep their opinions. I sit on the edge of the bed with the ring heavy on my finger and the ash of the burned card still clinging to thought. Below, a door opens and closes with that measured certainty the house recognizes. The silence afterward feels expensive. A single knock. The housekeeper stands with her hands folded, face arranged for storms. Mr. Romano requests you. Of course he does. The corridor looks longer at night, pulled thin by soft light. Staff pass as careful shadows. At the stairs I pause because stepping into the study always feels like walking into a confession I didn't plan to give. The door is open a hand's width. A low fire makes a steady hush. Maps sleep on the desk with a pen laid straight as a rule. He stands at the window, one hand on the frame, profile cut against dark glass. The garden is only a negative behind him, the U-arch a darker mouth. Close the door. I do, and the room seals around us. Heat gathers at my shins, climbs. I stay near the chair by the hearth. Sitting would give too much away. Standing in the center would give more. You brought me to watch a man you used to trust walk into a smaller room, I say. You burned a card with my name where the house could smell it. Now what? Now we finish what the day started. By which you mean another list of rules. Another correction. Another lesson written on my skin without asking. By which I mean we decide what you are in this house. I already know. Wall when you need a wall. Message when you want a message. Pawn when a rival needs bait. He turns from the window and crosses the room with that trained economy that makes furniture forget it can be heavy. He stops on the other side of the chair, not touching anything, using distance the way other men use volume. You think I don't see what that costs you? You count costs for everyone. I count survival for everyone, he answers, calm as a blade laid flat. Tonight I am counting you. I don't want to be counted, I want to be consulted. You were, when you brought me the whisper from the bar, when you stood where you were told not to, and learned fast what I would have taught slower, kinder. You insist on the fast lesson. You get it. Do not turn this into praise. You kept me from my own name when it arrived on a ribbon. I kept your name from being processed like an invoice. I made it useless to the man who sent it. You made it yours. It was already mine, he answers, voice dropping, heat turning into climate. By law, by ring, by the city's lazy habit of reading power, by the fact that I decided you keep breathing here, but that is not the whole of it. The floor tilts a degree only people who live inside a house can feel. He comes closer, then checks himself and stops. His restraint warms more than touch. What is the whole of it? You don't belong to me, he says. You belong to yourself, and the part of me that refuses loss has decided to stand in front of that fact until the world accepts it. You deliver this like a gift. It is an apology in the dialect I speak. I do not offer many. Try mine, then ask your question in it. The words I've held all evening arrange themselves. Am I a pawn to you? A shield to lift when rooms test your face? Did you purchase a widow because the city respects rings more than history? You are the person whose survival is my first calculation, he answers. I don't need your love. I need you to wake up tomorrow. You don't need my love, I repeat soft, and the echo stings. But you want me? Yes. No apology. It arrives like fact and sits down. The fire lifts a little, as if surprised. You want me while telling me not to look out a window, not to open a card, not to hold a glass the way I have all my life. I want you alive enough to argue about how you hold a glass. I will correct 10 small things if it keeps one large thing from cutting you. You want gratitude for rules. I want you here to hate them. He steps closer, 2 measured paces, then stops before heat becomes contact. He brackets the air beside me with his body's lines, not to trap, but to show how little it would take to do so. If he leaned, his forearm would touch the brick. He does not. The restraint burns. I am not Marco's ghost, he says. Do not aim grief at me hoping it passes through. It won't. I will take it and use it, or hand it back and make you carry it until it's yours. I will not pretend it's mine to solve. The name lands like old light-off glass. The mix rises, recedes, stubborn as tide. You wear his ring on my hand, I answer. You move through his rooms and correct their softness. You call it protection. It looks like erasure. I replaced mistakes with habits, not erasure, repair. At what cost? At the cost of being the man who is resented instead of mourned. I accept it. Silence, heavy and oddly generous, gives us both a breath. In it, a car turns at the end of the drive and keeps going. Somewhere a guard coughs into a sleeve and apologizes to no one. The study settles into its bones. Why me, I ask, and my voice arrives unarmed. You could have married a name with no blood on it, a woman who would call keys freedom. Because you don't thank me for anything, he answers. Because you don't mistake locks for love. Because when men try to put words in your mouth, you give them smoke. Because rooms behave when you enter and you refuse to be impressed when they do. Because you will not be bought. And yet someone placed you in a ledger, and I could not stand it. Raw, unpolished. It scrapes truth out of both of us. You terrify me, I say, not as accusation now, but as weather. You should and you shouldn't. Both truths. They belong to you now. We hold in the exact inch where restraint does all the work desire would ruin. The fire breathes. His shoulder is a line and a heat source. My breath tastes like iron and something I refuse to name. He lifts a hand as if to touch my face and stops short, pressure hanging in the air where contact would be. The shock of not being touched moves through me with a force I did not consent to and cannot deny. I don't want to belong to you, I say. I don't want to belong to anyone. Then belong to yourself with me. The last 2 words draw a line across the floor and dare me to step over. Pride lists its objections. Fear recites warnings. Grief counts its coins. None of them answer as clearly as my body, which refuses to run. And if I choose that, if I choose myself and you, what changes? I stop arranging you and arrange everything around you instead. I keep the wolves outside the hedge. I keep your name off paper and in your mouth. I keep rooms from buying pieces of you in polite payments. I teach you what I know until you don't need my rules. You will still hate me sometimes. I accept it. You will still fear me when I choose to be what the city requires. I accept that too. And what do you take from me that you do not already own? Nothing, he says, and it isn't greed, it's restraint. Not love. Not forgiveness. Not thanks. I take what you bring when you bring it, and I push away what tries to take it from you before you decide to give. Not romance, not even kindness. A structure offered where chaos keeps a tent. A vow in a language that doesn't need a church. Honest enough to hurt. Do I get to say no? You always do. What happens if I do? Nothing, he answers. And everything. I still keep you alive. I still count weather. I still burn cards. I still make rooms behave when you enter. You will still hate me for it and rely on it in the same breath. Not a threat, a description. A small laugh escapes, tired and surprised. You make captivity sound like rescue. I make rescue sound like price because it is. I step away from the hearth for cooler air. He doesn't follow. He retracts like tide and leaves warmth to prove it was there. Restraint travels anyway, a current I can still feel. Luca, I ask, what happens to him? He writes maps until his hand learns humility. Then he leaves by a door that points away from the hills and does not return. If he looks back, the road corrects him. And Sana receives nothing, no story, no rumor worth ink. If he comes close enough to ask for one, he learns I charge more than he can afford. You enjoyed that sentence. I enjoyed imagining his face. The smile comes and goes before it can pretend to be habit. Coals shift in a small sigh. The house beyond the study holds its breath, as if posture matters to walls when words change people. I can't promise what you'd want, I say, not love, not the shape, not the timing. I did not ask. You admitted you want me. I will not deny it, he answers. I will not drag it into light like a trophy. I will keep it where it works, between us, in rooms like this. Small, heavy, useful. I look at him as if he were a painting I've avoided because it tells the truth too plainly. The line at his mouth is work, not cruelty. The patience in his eyes is the kind that outlasts winters and men who swear they can buy spring. He's not kind. He's careful. He's not gentle. He's exact. The strange safety in that honesty pulls at me like gravity. Then teach me, I say, and the words surprise both of us. Teach me what keeps me alive so I can choose when to throw your rules away and still live. He nods once. No triumph. Agreement between commanders. 9, he says. Not because I order it. Because it is the hour you will remember when you decide you don't need reminders. I move to the door and stop because leaving without a look would turn the moment into theater, and enough of the day has auditioned. He stands where he always stands, the room arranged around him because it has learned this shape keeps it from breaking. One hand rests near the map with the hill road. His eyes hold that unblinking attention that can be heat if I let it. I do not. I still feel it. Do not bring me here to make me smaller, I say. If I enter this room, it's because you intend me as large as the danger you warn me about. I will. Then we are not a wall and a message anymore. No, we are a house and the law it keeps. Ridiculous and true at once. It sits in my mouth and tastes like iron, and something almost sweet. I open the door. The hallway air is cooler. The housekeeper passes with a folded cloth and pretends not to measure my face. A guard at the far end stands a half step straighter and remembers to breathe. The staircase carries me up without asking what I mean to do with height. In my room, the mirror returns a different version of me. The braid is less strict. The mouth a degree more certain. I take off the ring and lay it on the table, then put it back on because the absence feels like erasing a sentence I'm not sure I want gone. I sit on the bed and look at the garden. The arch is a mouth shaped by hedge and night. The sea is a dull steel line. Beyond the wall, the city mutters, annoyed that a house has kept its secrets one more day. I am not Marco's widow, not in the small way the phrase tried to cage me. I am not a message at a man's shoulder. I am not a ribbon rumor. I am something sharper and harder and less willing to be read by strangers. I am tied to a man I swore I would never want, and I do not know what the wanting will make of me. I know this. I will not be a door. I will be the person the house wraps itself around when weather comes. A light goes out in the east wing. Another follows. The estate folds itself into night like a coat. I lie back and listen to old wood talk to itself. Sleep arrives like a guard taking the post he prefers, not because he's told to, but because the spot fits his feet. Downstairs, the study holds its last hour. A man appears in the doorway and waits. The driver, loose thread cut clean. The florist will sleep late. Good. The hills. Quiet, keep them so. The man leaves. Dante pours a measure and lets it sit. The fire is mostly coals, a bed of red thought. He stands with the glass and looks at the map he already knows. His shoulders drop a degree. The first concession the day wins from him. She will learn, he murmurs into the earned quiet. And so will I.